to you.
So only thing
Can
now.
you hear me?
Yeah,
Can
yeah,
you hear
absolutely,
me clear?
absolutely, absolutely.
Yep.
So now what
So-
is okay? Yeah, yeah, Bob, you were saying something.
So Vikram, tell me the golf in India.
Yeah.
You mentioned you were out golfing yesterday.
Yeah.
So is it enjoyable? Is it very hot? Is it a different game?
Look, I tell you, with me, heat has never been an issue. When
Right.
you've grown up in a city where the temperature goes to 48, I mean, it's not something that you can even tell yourself that, oh, half the year I'm not going to get out. So right from childhood, we've been out there. So yesterday, I think it was about 38. I was playing at about 38. So it's cool right now. It's going to get a little hotter as we go along.
Right.
But there was a breeze. Things are not as bad. There is a breeze that we're getting these days. So
Right.
I think the heat matters only when there is a humidity.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We have a very dry weather, so that helps a lot.
Yeah.
That definitely helps. But Abe, have you met Mr. Krishnan is here, Santan Krishnan? Mr.
Hello.
Hi. How
Hello,
are you?
Vikram.
Hi.
How are you?
Mr. Krishnan is a lawyer in the Supreme Court and also
hi.
mediator. And
Welcome.
Gunavati is in Malaysia. Gunavati, you want to say hi to Abe, or you just settling things?
Yes, settling, I think.
She's settling, yeah.
Yep.
And Kato, you definitely met.
Yes. Yes, I have.
And Bob also is like, okay, you already met him. So
Yep. And I've got my friend Flavia is joining us from
Flavia's here. Yeah, Flavia is here. Vicky had joined us, but I haven't seen Vicky. So, but I'll tell you what's happened. Abe, you also noticed.
Vicky, a friend of mine, she's from Sydney.
Hi, Flavia. You can unmute yourself. You can say hi to everyone. It's my living room.
Hello, welcome from Canberra, Australia.
Flavia, if you want to meet everyone else, Mr. Krishnan is here. He's
Hello.
Kato is in Japan. Bob is in Ireland.
Hi, Flavia.
And Abe, you've met, so I don't have to introduce him. But how are things with you in Canberra?
Well, it's getting cold, may I say? Close to -2.
Already? Oh, wow. Okay, so that's something which we were just talking about the weather in Delhi. I was just saying that we've got to about 38 now. We're moving. We'll get to 48. We'll get there very soon. So things are a little different on this end.
Best of luck with the COVID in India.
I'll tell you about the best thing. Don't watch the news, and then everything is good. Look, you have to take the same precautions. You take the vaccine, you have to take the same precautions. So might as well just get used to that life rather than looking at statistics and getting worked up. So this I realized about 8-9 months back. I said, this is not getting anywhere. Things are going to be the same. We'll still screw up. I have my daughter who goes out to work and she comes back and no precautions taken. I was telling her today also, when you're with us, you wear a mask. But I think we just, the educated illiterate, that is what we are. So Gunavati is connected now. Gunavati, you connected now?
Yes.
Hi, Gunavati.
Okay.
Hi.
And you met Abe. Surely you met him earlier. Gunavati, Abe, have you met Gunavati earlier?
I think we met in previous program. You were.
Yes,
definitely. And Kato, definitely you met earlier. Bob, you've met earlier. Flavia, you haven't met. She's disappeared. Ilan is here. Ilan, obviously.
Ilan is here.
You know Mr. Krishnan, is it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And Flavia has come back. I don't know. She disappears and comes back. How does she do it? I don't know. She goes and comes back. And David, I don't know David. So hi, David.
A very close friend of mine, David.
Hi.
We both from the Sydney Peace Foundation, and David is the chair of the peace group in the Rotary.
Very nice. So,
Hello,
hi, David. Do I need to take you around with everyone? I'll start from Bob. Bob is in Ireland. Kato is in Japan. Santan Krishnan is in Delhi. Gunavati is in Malaysia. Flavia is in Canberra. Ilan is in Como, Italy. He's the only one who's enjoying himself in the lockdown. He got stuck in Como and he stayed there. And he's really enjoying himself. If he shows us the view from his apartment in Como, right overlooking the lake, he's one man who's enjoyed himself.
Yes.
So Abe, I tell you what we'll do. I think we can. I think we should start in general.
Okay.
But if you would just please mute yourself, I won't mute you people. And whenever you want to ask Abe anything, just there's a virtual hand that you have at the bottom. Just put your virtual hand up. We'll get you into the conversation. Right, Abe?
Okay.
So Abe, first of all, you have to tell us what all are you doing these days? What kind of work and everything?
Okay. I don't know which hat I start with.
All of them.
Well, currently, my full-time job is a team manager in the child protection area. And my work really involves my team takes reports from police, hospitals, public about child abuse cases. They do an assessment and consult with me, and we agree on response, and we send it off to relevant offices. That's in the main job. I'm a mediator as well. I still do mediation privately, and that keeps me busy. I also in the peace building group with Flavia, who is here with us tonight, and we are looking at establishing a peace build group, and that will happening tomorrow.
Okay, but you're also a professor.
I have been teaching until this year, which I now retired from teaching. So I'm retiring from the child protection as well later this year in July. And I will be really more focused on peace build mediation. And we're looking at really establishing peace monuments in Sydney.
I was going to get to that. But what? Okay. So what we'll do is we'll get to this later. First, let's start where we should start. So give me 1 minute and let me start where we should start, because this we'll get to. I mean, what you're doing now on a more elaborate basis, we'll get there. This is where we have to start, is it?
That's my mother.
Yes, this is where it all started. So let's start from here.
That's all started. That's fine.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a very old photo of my mother. That's when I left Jordan. She was there. And yeah, she's lived until the age of 89.
Very nice.
Yes, she lived a very strong-willed woman. She has great influence on me. I always say I have 3 women in my life who mentored me and influenced the way I am. And of course, she is number 1. And I'll come to the other 2 later.
Okay, but where were you born, Abe?
I was born in Jordan, in the northern part of Jordan, in Erbil, in the refugee camp after the 1948 war. My parents left Jaffa, Palestine. They settled in Nablus, another city in the West Bank, and stayed there for a year before moving to Jordan because they thought it was safer for them. And they lived there in a refugee camp managed by the United Nations. And I was born there. We had a tent, and we lived in a tent, the whole family. And we lived there for a while. And it wasn't easy living in a tent with the snow around you, mud, dust floor. I mean, we didn't have any towels or whatever. So it was very basic.
But up to what age were you there?
I was born there in 51, which is 3 years after the 48 war. We stayed there for at least about 8 years, sorry, in the tent, we stayed about 4 years.
Mhm.
My mother, again, she's very strong woman and doesn't give up. So she decided to build a mud house. And we all worked in doing the bricks from mud, and we all built it together.
Very
We
nice.
didn't have, yeah.
No, but tell me that you know, in terms of the camp and everything, you have memories of that, or these are things which have been told to you?
I know I do have memories from the camp. When I was school age there, I used to go to school with a shoe or sandal made by my brother. He used to get the old car tires, cut them up, make the sole out of the main part of the tire, and then use the thinner parts as straps.
Mhm.
And that was my first sandal I remember going to school with. It used to be very cold, and I started work at the age of 5 or 6
Mhm.
in a Turkish delight factory, sweet factory. Everybody had to do some work because we had no income. The United Nations used to give us some rations, sugar, rice, flour, ghee, and what else was that sort of staples. And we used to live from that, but of course that wasn't enough. So we used to go and do some work to buy for other things that we needed for the living. I used to do my own toys, and I was good at it. I used to use the ball bearings from the cars, tires, the wheels, and I used to do carts. So I put the 4 wheels in under blank of timber, and I used to put those wheels around it, and it was fun.
Nice.
Sliding down there. My first ball was made of all the cloth put together, tied up, and it would last for 2 or 3 games, and we have to do it again. So that was the
But
shout.
Abe, a little bit of a background about what was happening in 1948, the war, because I'm telling you, people would not know. So we just a background of that period.
Okay. My parents born in Jaffa, which is, it used to be the main city, and Tel Aviv was the suburb of Jaffa. Jaffa was mainly Jewish, Palestinian mixed city. Tel Aviv was mostly a Jewish suburb. And they lived really very well. I mean, Jaffa, the Jews and Palestinians lived really very good life together. My father told me stories about how they lived peacefully. They enjoyed working together, going out together, socializing, helping each other. They were really very, very good, strong community. And there was no sense of enmity between them. The whole thing, I think my father said in 1936, mostly when the British increased the immigration of Jews from Europe. And I think when the whole thing became so politicized, as you know, politics don't make friends.
Yep.
And if they were friends, they were divided by politics. And there were concerns about the Palestinians losing their land, and they were seeing it happening before their own eyes. And there were many strikes and all of that, but it didn't work. So at the end of the day, initially they were in 1920s, they were about 5 to 10% Jewish population. The rest, 90%, were Palestinians. This started to increase from 10% to 20 to 30%. By 48, they were about in the high 30%. when the British decided to partition Palestine between Jewish and Palestinian, they decided to give 50% of the country to the Jews and 49% to the Palestinians. And that, of course, they did not, the Palestinians were not happy being the majority, given 49%. And they said, why divide anyhow? Mostly they wanted to keep the country intact as it was. The British had different ideas. The Zionist movement and mostly the armed gangs of the Jewish Zionists there, Haganah, Stain, were more active and supported by the British to some degree, giving them arms, ammunition, and they have the funds, the money, and they had the upper hand. By 1947, the partition was made reality. However, the Palestinians continued to reject it. In 1948, the British decided to hand the keys to the Zionist movement there, and they left the country. And that's when the Zionist, or now Israel, army, fully trained army against really the population, the Palestinian population, had no arms, no ammunition, nothing. There's a lot of talk then happened during that period where the Arab armies invaded the newly established state of Israel. I think if we look back at the history, the Jordanian army was under British command. The Egyptian were still under British command. The Iraqi, the Syrian, they all under mostly British or French. They were still under the occupation of those colonial powers. So they did not really enter the war to whatever, they only entered to establish the United Nations at the time boundaries. And that's what happened. The West Bank and Gaza were saved. Israel took 78%, not 51%, 78% of the land, and the Palestinians left with 51%. In 1951, the ruler of Jordan, which used to be Transjordan, decided in collaboration with the newly established state of Israel to annex the West Bank and call it the today's Kingdom of Jordan. And the reason for that was they did not want a Palestine to exist. By taking West Bank, they demolished any chance of a Palestinian state being established. And the Palestine was wiped out of the map. Mm-hmm. And then most of the population, the Palestinian, either left because of fear of massacres. There were a few massacres happened at the time. Deir Yassin was one of the infamous massacres that happened. And the population in a war zone, in the wartime, with no defense, no arms, they just fled. It's a human nature.
But what was your father? What were your parents doing earlier?
My father was a baker. He had a bakery, and he used to be a contractor for the British Army. Mm-hmm. And that's him, yep. Mm-hmm. And he used to do the baking for the British Army at the time. And he was a very proud man. He was the breadwinner of not just for his family, but for his brothers and sisters, because he was quite well off. Mm-hmm. And he suffered greatly after he lost everything. In one night, he just ended up with nothing. Obviously, he lost the house, the bakery, the living. They just left with nothing at all. They couldn't take anything with them except the bare necessities and the children. They just kept walking.
Because we hear similar stories here, because when we got independence, then India and Pakistan were made. So there were similar stories there. People from there had to come in with nothing. And again, the same thing, those camps, they had to live in those camps. The ones that went from here went there. How they lived, I would not know so much about. But I know when they came, who came here, they were living in similar conditions and had to give up everything. I mean, whatever you were doing, you had businesses, industries, anything.
You can't take anything with you.
So I'm sure it must have been very tough for him. I mean, I don't. How did he handle it? How did he handle that?
He never really recovered. He went, as you can see from the photo, he was very healthy man. There was another photo there when he was after that, where he.
And I have this photograph. I have these.
That's when they were married.
Yeah, this is the earlier one.
There's another one. Sorry, maybe there's none. Yeah.
No, it's not there. It's not there.
No, it's not there. Okay. So what happened there? I mean, he suffered from diabetic and tuberculosis. By the way, he never smoked. And he ended up being in hospital in Naples for 6 years. I was about 4 or 5 years when he contracted that. I don't remember. I don't have much memory of him, because by the time I started to really get to know him, he was in hospital. And to go from Erbil to Naples, it's quite a journey. And we didn't have the money to go there every week or every month. So we used to visit him in Ramadan, for instance, or Eid, once or twice a year. We used to visit him.
So that's a victim of politics.
Yes.
But tell me, what about your parents? I mean, where did they meet? When did they get married? Something about that?
Well, they met in Jaffa, and they didn't talk much about. I mean, my father didn't say anything or much about his life. Maybe because I was too young at the time when I started to get to know him. My mother said they lived in the same area. She used to go and bake her bread there, and they met and they liked each other, and that's how they got married.
Nice.
Yes.
No, but what about your siblings? I mean, you have some brothers.
I have to. We are 13 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
Okay, four of us born after 48, the youngest 4. The rest were born in Jaffa.
So the eldest is how much older than you?
The eldest, he sadly passed away 3 years ago.
But
yeah,
how much older?
He was 20 years older than me.
So then he would tell you a lot of things about growing up there.
He did. But what happened is when they came to Jordan, there was no schooling and anything. Everything was disrupted. So he ended up going. Everyone went to work in any job. He started his job as a shoemaker. He self-made. The other brother was a cabinet maker, the one younger than him. My sisters, 3 of them were married, and they got married in the camp. One of them was married, the eldest, and the other, they married in the camp. And there were a lot of stories happening around that time where some families were actually selling their children at the time. There were a lot of activities happening there where scouts going out, taking children away. And they approached my mom for one of my sisters, and she said no. Because they were just desperate for money, and they can't really offer much to their children out of desperation, basically. My mother was very industrial herself. She's, like I said, determined. She's self-made. As you would know, the Middle Eastern there, when they marry, the dowry is in gold. The husband gives the wife, not the wife, the husband. So my father did give her gold as a dowry when he married her, and she kept those bracelets and necklaces and rings. And they were the only things that she took with her from Jaffa. She wanted to buy a block of land in Jordan, and my father refused, saying, "We will be back. We're going back home when
Obviously,
things settle down."
because obviously for him that was that was what he would have
Yeah.
wanted to go back to. I mean, the camp
Also,
and all. Yeah.
he had that hope that when things settle down, everyone will go back home and settle back and hopefully live in peace. That's never happened. My mother was more realistic and had more foresight than him. And I think I understand where he was coming from. He just did not want to admit that he lost everything and not able to provide living for his children and family. So he was really resisting that thought of being completely with nothing except the tent. So after my father went to hospital, she decided that she went and sold some of the gold. She bought a sewing machine, and my mother was illiterate in Arabic and any other language. So she managed to get those journals, Berda, B-O-R-D-A, and they were fashion magazines. And she just used it for women. And she used just to look at it and ask people if they want to have anything from that magazine, and she will make it for them. And that's how she provided for us, including ourselves when we were working after school. She insisted that we go to school. The youngest four. The older ones, it's too late for them to restart schooling because of the interruption in the war and everything else. But the youngest four she insisted that we continue our education. I didn't like school. I hated it. I'd rather go and be doing the sweets in the Turkish delight factory. There's lots of fun there, but she never wanted that. And poor mom used to take me every morning with my hand and drag me to school every single day without fail. She would get me in the class. She waits outside the class until the teacher walks in, just in case I do the runner.
So she did all that, yeah. She
did. She said, it doesn't matter what, you're going to continue education. I never really paid too much attention. I don't know how I managed to go, pass my exams from one year to the next, but I was just scribing by the teeth on how I managed to get to the next class until I did my school certificate. When I started my high school, all of a sudden I decided I want to be in school. And I really did very well. I used to be either the first or second in the class. And we talk about a class of 50 people, 50 students.
What is the mix there? What kind of, the children there are from what background? What is?
Are they all Palestinians until the school certificate? In the high school, it was mixed Jordanian and Palestinians. It was a Jordanian school, but the United Nations would pay the Jordanian government for our schooling in their schools. Until the year 10, all schools were run by the United Nations. So it wasn't costing us anything.
But you moved out of the camp now? You're living somewhere?
We have moved out of the camp. Initially, we built the house in a mud house. We lived in it for at least 5-6 years before my mom decided to sell it. And we rented a house in the CBD of Irbid. We talk about, it's about 1K away from the camp. but it's a much better house. It's still 2-bedroom, but it was much better. And there we continued to work, and my mother saved money enough to buy a block of land in the outskirts of the city, and we built our first house there.
Strong woman, strong woman.
She was very strong, never gave up.
Yeah.
She never gave up. Yeah. And she was always, I mean, like I said, I mean, I put her to the test every day. And I've learned so much from her in terms of being determined. Nothing is impossible. So it was really.
So in simple terms, what we can say, you're sitting here because of her. That's what we have to say.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't thank her enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should also thank her, because we have you here. Okay, so then now you're in school. You're doing well in school after that.
I did very well in school. The only subject I failed in high school was cadetship. I never liked guns. And I honestly, when I did my shooting, I did not even anywhere near the target. So I failed it, but luckily it was not a mandatory subject in the high school. So I'm happy with that result. So really, I hated guns. I started my activism really at that point from high school. I was 14 years old. And that's when I really, because I watched so much horrors around me. I've seen rockets, I've seen wars. Our house, the new house we built, it's right on the top of a hill. And by going into the roof, you can see the borders, the West Bank and the Syrian border. We were in that section of the borders. And every time there was war, we sit in the roof and watch the war happening right there before your own eyes, as if you're watching a movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. That's a tough one to see.
It was. Yeah. I think the toughest time was in between 1968 and 1970. And that's the time when I lived in bomb shelters in those days. We all lived in bomb shelters because Israel was firing rockets at our city almost daily without notice, without warning or anything. All of a sudden you hear the rockets flying over and hitting. One day we were bombarded with those rockets, and I was in the shopping center. My brother was there, and we started running towards the bomb shelter. And a rocket landed next to my brother, and I saw him airborne. I thought he's finished. Luckily, he survived with just one leg. So that's how bad it was. I walking to school in the morning was just watching the blood and bits and pieces of flesh from people who were killed in those rockets. It was very difficult. When we doing the high school exams.
No, but tell me, how, Abe, when you see all this, I mean, how did you explain this to yourself, that what is happening? What were the thoughts in your mind in this situation?
Look, there's a lot of anger, frustration. I did not really understand the conflict to the point where I can really give a meaningful explanation. All what I saw there was enemy firing rockets at us, and we will get killed. Yeah. Not only rockets, there were times when the Israeli jets would fly at low altitude, exceeding the sand barrier, And that is the most frightening experience for anybody. The whole ground shakes under you. Everything shakes. You think you are in an earthquake zone. And that happens in the middle of the night when everybody's sleeping. It's just sheer intimidation, just to still fear on us.
Well, I'm just thinking that at about what you're about 16, 17 years old at that time, whatever be the history, just the fact that humans can do this to humans, how do you explain that to yourself? I'm just trying to think what goes on.
Look, I hated fighting. I hated wars. I hated just the fact that there is a war and not having a normal living experience like a childhood that we take for granted here. It's just, I mean, that was normal. It was normal. I thought, this is life. This is how people live. I didn't see any other life that is different from that. So you just go on with your life as if nothing happened. You block it out of your mind. You block it out of it's just the next day is another day.
Yeah. Like you're saying that this is what you saw. You grew up in this. This was the only thing you saw. So thinking that there is life beyond this wasn't something that you even knew existed. So maybe that's no. But I'm just thinking that you lose faith in humanity when you see this happening in front of you. What goes on in your mind? I'm just thinking at that point of time.
I honestly, I wasn't thinking of humanity. I wasn't thinking of anything else. All what it was so polarized in my mind. There's a monster on the other side of the border who just about want to kill. And that's all what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking about anything else. I never met an Israeli or Jewish or all what I see is the end result of their action. The people I love and care about being killed right before my own eyes. That's all that's how polarized the whole view in my mind. I wasn't thinking. I was thinking just, this is how they do it. Not only we lost our homes, we lost everything, and now we are about to lose our life. That's how what we were thinking about. It's amazing. It's really, this struck me a few years ago, and I was invited to Insight, a space program Insight, and they had an Israeli general, retired Israeli general, as a guest speaker. And after the program, I went to him and told him, hi, which section you were stationed? And he said, I was in the river, around the Jordan River Valley. And I said, do you remember you were the rockets and all that? He said, no, I don't remember any of that. We never fired rocket at you. And you know that I wasn't really say it in a military hate, acknowledging and actually wanted me to adapt my own story, to adapt my own reality. That was worse than the rocket itself.
Yeah, must be. I think for them also, I'm sure it was difficult for them to live with it also. I mean, you're being told to do something, you're doing it. We don't know what goes in their mind also, because for them also to send out something into someone and which will kill someone, I think that'll be also interesting to find out that what goes in their mind at that time.
Look, it's the whole idea. I mean, I didn't understand it then, but I'm now more wiser than before. And I think the whole idea of the whole exercise is to show who is more powerful. Control. And it's just sheer control and power. It's just display. There were Fatih at the time, who started in 1965 in Egypt. and there was infiltration from Fatah into the West Bank. They were doing some missions there. They were not effective, but it's just morale lifting for the Palestinians to say we are doing something. And with each operation that Fatah did, we used to get tons and tons of rockets fired at us. Absolutely disproportionate in a way. And it is, I mean, they complain about their population, the civilians being targeted, and none of them get killed, yet they target the civilians in my city. And we were at the receiving end.
But
And
what?
this,
No. But what was the activism that what were you doing in school? I mean, what kind of?
look, I was asked to join the Fatah when they first established, and they were underground. And this is something that I've learned very well. You can be underground. You have the best security system in the world, and once people underground, it's hard to detect. It's not easy. And the Jordanian regime at the time was absolutely they were supported by Israel intelligence, and they tried to suppress any uprising or any activism, and they couldn't. It was everywhere and operating right under the noses and ears of the security without them knowing, because it was done in a way. You always have ways around what security is in place. When there are laws there, people know how to beat the laws or cheat on it or whatever. I did not join the Fatah military group because, like I said earlier, I'm not into guns and I don't believe in guns. Never believed in it. But I did do a political activism. My political activism it's really about the human rights. I used to write in the school, a school journal, and we used to publish it every week. And we used to write articles and all of that. And I always interested in about living in peace and harmony and quoting from the Quran, quoting from our history and all of that. But that's as far as I went. I went to different places, but there was no chance for me to talk to any Israeli or Jewish because they were not there. When I came to Australia, that's when I started really do the activism with the Jewish community here, and I'll talk about it once we finish that. But I mean, really, when I did my high school exam, there were rockets landed in the exam hall and killed a few students there. And it was deemed unsafe for us to continue doing the exams in the city. So we used to get buses in the morning, take us to another city, do our exams, and then bus us back home at the end of the day. And that went on for the whole duration of the exam. It was very difficult for us really to have a sense of it.
Oh, but like Abe, I know you just said that the classroom is bombed and children die. I mean, you just made a statement, but you actually felt it. I mean, this was happening to someone whom you're studying with, or you in your school. So how do you react to that internally? Or death just becomes something which?
Honestly, we were numb, emotionally numb. We see death as a reality. We were not really, as much as I would say, I mean, it killed the emotions, not only the person. It killed our own emotions, our reaction, the feelings. It's just we take it as something normal. It happens every day. And when you are helpless and hopeless at the same time, and you see it's something happy, calamity in front of you, and you know you can't do anything about it. You only then deal with the issue at hand, bury the dead, and move on.
But did that carry on later in life? I mean, that numbness to all this.
It has affected me when I came to Australia. When I again, because I have found the peace and all of the things in Australia, that's when I really start to react to all of that.
Mhm.
And remember all those sort of events that I went through.
Okay, so it was just something which was at that point of time, just images going in front of you, as part of it, and no time to think. Life has
No,
to just go on.
no, not at all. You don't think about your own life at the same time because you think, I survived today, that's good. That's really what I was thinking at the time. And many of my colleagues in the same boat.
But what about your siblings? I mean, what has their reaction been? How have they taken it?
They were much the same. We don't even talk about it. And that's the hardest part. We did not talk about it. It's like we have here. If we have a storm, we talk about, oh, there's a storm. That's the end of it. Maybe we talk about the weather here more than we talk about the deaths and the rockets and the war that's happening. We just talk about it. We were sitting, he used to sit on the roof of our house and watch during the night the flares, the guns, the jet fighters. We were watching it. It's like you're sitting in your lounge room and watching a movie in your TV.
Which we were also watching when Iraq and had come into Kuwait. At that point of time, we all that were live telecast on television, so it was become a movie and something. I mean, this is war happening, and it was something televised as if it's a movie happening. I mean, that's what it had become, a show in that kind.
Absolutely. I get more affected now when I hear about the war there and I see it here. I get more affected than I was affected physically or mentally when I was there, because I can relate my experience to the experience of these people. Poor people, regardless which side of the fence they sit, they still suffer.
But when in that situation, when you're saying, watching all these rockets going here and there, but now you're sitting as a family, you're talking to your mother. How do you people? What I mean, how did she explain this to you?
Like I said, it was not a dinner table discussion. All what she wanted us, get into the bomb shelter and sit there until it's over. She wanted to make sure we are safe. That's all really what mattered. It's had to be safe and survive that rocket attack.
But some of your siblings are younger than you also.
They are 2 younger than me, yes.
I mean, they were, how much difference is there?
They were
Age difference?
horrified. They were horrified. We used to cuddle together when the jet fighters break the sand barrier. That was more frightening than the rockets that falling. The rocket we can hide in bomb shelters and survive. But the break in the sand barrier was absolutely the most horrific experience. I don't wish it to anybody to live that experience. In the middle of the night, you are asleep. Our sleep, we can't sleep for a few more nights because waiting for it to happen again. And there's no button. It just happens at random.
But in all this, then you also have a school life as a child to grow up in. That also goes on, or there? I mean, as children who play together, all that was also happening, or are you people? No.
We continue the school. I continued to work after school in the factory. So we just had to survive. It's survival. If we cannot stop and think what's happening to us, we can't afford it.
Because children, the innocence that children have, the games that they play innocently and all those things would have been different.
It is. I mean, I can understand what we did not really think about it that time. I'm now in the child protection here. And when we get reports, I'm just giving you an analogy, and domestic violence, horrific domestic violence happening, the police report and we ask where were the kids, what happened to the kids, and they say, the kids were just watching TV or playing Xbox or sleep. They as if nothing is happening around them.
Mhm.
And that's really survival thing for kids to try to block what's happening around them that they didn't like by engaging in other activities. Our play and our things that was about blocking the reality of the situation and surviving it.
So, okay, tough period. But all this that you were writing, all these articles and everything, you had a group or something that you were part of?
Well, it's a group of students. We used to write those articles in the wall journal at the school. And it's just, again, it's a distraction. It's really distraction. We did not put anything about the war or about who killed or whatever. We were doing just something completely different. Again, it's a survival. It's a subject that wasn't easy for us. That's one of those difficult conversations. We don't just talk what we talk about, what we say. We didn't know.
But in all,
yeah.
But in all these negative experiences, are there any positive experiences that you can talk about?
The positive experience. I mean, my family were quite close-knit family. We all were together. We managed. My mother kept us together. I mean, we really had a wonderful family life. I can't fault it. I mean, if it wasn't for mother, we would be still living in the tent. And that's something really positive. She gave me education. It's just, I mean, with all that gloom and doom, we still had our fun and our life. Almost, it's like living in a cemetery, basically. You want to make the most out of it because you're still above ground. And while you're above ground, you want to live your life.
No, but I'm thinking that, I mean, okay, like you said, it's all numb. You're numb on a lot of things, but a lot of nice things would be happening in your thoughts. Some nice thoughts about things. Something.
I had my friendships. One thing, I mean, good about it, all my friends were smokers, and they tried to make me smoke. They tried to influence me in a way or other. I did smoke 1 or 2 cigarettes. I hated it more. I never smoked ever again. So that's one thing that I could have ended up with chain smoking like them. I took a trip after my high school with a close friend of mine. We traveled by car through Syria, Turkey, Lebanon, back to Syria into Jordan. It was about a month trip. We never did this ever. It was our first trip outside Jordan. And we enjoyed the life, being on the road so much. It was really good in that way. I lived in Lebanon for 18 months after that. And that's my life there. I worked there as a writer.
But these friends that you went with on that road trip, you were in touch, or are you still in touch with them?
I lost contact with them after 10 years after arriving in Australia. Just things start moving away from, and there was no hope of us getting back together because I was hoping to go back and connect. When I went back there, I did connect with them. I went back in 77, my first trip back to Jordan, and that was the last. And I think that's something to do with my memory of what happened there, and I wanted to block it out completely.
But in terms of the children around you, the Jordanian and Palestinian, you don't have other Syrians and other people studying with you.
No, they were only Jordanian and Palestinians in Jordan. The Syrians were back in Syria. So they were the only ones. I mean, the happy times that I saw in my childhood was visiting my father. The very few times I visited my father, and being outside Erbil, the one I was born in. And it was absolutely marvelous trip, taking the car and crossing the Jordan River into Nablus and staying in a hotel there. It was fantastic. I enjoyed every minute of it. So it was really fun.
And your father, yeah. No, please,
Yeah.
you were saying something. You were saying something.
No, I'm saying we were not able to actually be with him physically because of he was sort of in isolated ward because of his tuberculosis, and we just see him from a distance. That was hard, but at the time it was the norm for that, just because we did not know how to approach him. He died really very sad man, very broken-hearted, and I remember they brought his body.
But at what age? What age was he at that time?
He was quite young. He died quite young. He was in his mid-50s.
Okay. And you were how old were you that time?
At the time, I was still in doing my school certificate, which is around. I was about 12 or 13.
Young. That's young to handle that also.
Very young, yeah.
Because I'm sure that you see death in other sense in the bombings and anything, and then your own father must be a very different thing. That's a different experience, I'm sure.
It was. I remember the day they brought his body to us from Nablus after he died in hospital. He died alone. We were not there with him. The only thing we saw was the ambulance bringing him to the house, and here's your father. I remember I was coming from school and everybody was crying in the house and wailing, and too many people around. And I said, what's happening? And they said, my mother said, go and have a look in that room next door. I went there and there was a body laying down, covered. I lifted the cover and I saw my father's face. To be honest with you, I did not cry. Like I said, the emotions and feelings were dead. We were completely numb. It's just another dead body. And that's the saddest part in the whole thing.
That is tough. But then, then after that, now you in school, you finished your school in.
I was offered 2 scholarships after I finished school, one to Egypt and one to Algeria. They are from the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization. They used to support the Palestinian students to get education. And I also received one interesting job offer. I'm just about 19 years old, out of high school, and a friend of mine approached me and said, what do you want to do? And I said, I'm not sure. I'm considering the 2 scholarships that I have offered. And he said, would you like to have a job with us? He is Jordanian, not Palestinian background. And I said, what sort of work? And he said, with the security services. And the money offered at the time was much better than a graduate from university. And I said to him, honestly, I can't see myself spying on my own people. There's no way. I turned the offer down. He said, well, look, many people would love a job like this with all its fringe benefits you get. My late brother-in-law, he was a soldier first in the army, Jordanian army, and then he joined the security services. And I used to walk around with him in the streets. He would walk into a shop and take whatever he wanted without paying for it. And I thought that was really, it disgusted me. People very poor, they try to make a living, and here people like my late brother-in-law who just exploit that because they fear him. If they had asked him to pay for it, he would do something nasty to them. And that's something really I didn't like. So I turned it down. And then my brother, who was here in Sydney, said, would you like to come and finish your education here? Having the 2 scholarships, I said to myself, I could finish my university in one of those in Algeria or Egypt, but then I have to go back to the same environment, the same situation. I might not get even a job. I'd rather then come to Australia. There's better options for me there. And that's when I decided to come to Australia.
But before we get into Australia, David has something to say. David, you want to ask Abe yourself?
Sorry?
David had something to say.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Abe. No, I just put a written question. I'm happy for Vikram to read it out because it's a bit relevant to the Australian situation, but whether it's relevant to everybody else's situation, I'm not.
No, please, why don't you? David, you can go ahead.
Well, my question, Abe, was this, that you seem to talk a lot about the importance of blocking out your past. You just don't want to deal with it or confront it, which is quite understandable. And yet these days, confronting our past seems to be the preferred method of moving forward. And that's certainly true here in Australia, where white Australia anyway, has not made peace with its indigenous past. So here you have this push for truth-telling, and yet you seem to be saying that not facing the past and just getting on with living seems to be an effective strategy. What do you make of the importance of confronting your past and telling the truth about your history?
Absolutely, you're quite right there, David. I think for me, while living the trauma, there was no time for me to confront what's happening there because I could reflect on it on one day, but the next day the same thing happens again. While I was in that environment, it was difficult for us to face or reflect on our past. I find it much easier for me here being in peace and not living in trauma to reflect on my trauma. And I think I dealt with it in different way. Rather than just being self-reflecting, I actually reached out to the Jewish community. And I started, as you would know, and thanks to you for introducing me to the Jewish community, by actually having the dialogues and expressing my feelings to my Jewish friends and discuss it. And that's, I felt much easier for me to deal with it. I discovered Israel does not represent all the Jews in the world. And Israel is not made up of just people shooting rockets at Palestinians. They are very peace-loving ones. They are humans. They are all sorts of people like everywhere else. And I'm fortunate to have met you and many others here in Sydney, because that helped me a lot in dealing with my past. I'm no longer a prisoner of my past, of the trauma I lived in. I'm much more adjusted person, and I can talk about it. I can work with it much easier and at ease with it. Does that answer your question?
It certainly does. Thank you.
And David, we'll come back. I'm sure there'll be more questions. We'll come back to that. But Ilan had something to say. Ilan was more interested in the fact of the property in Jaffa. Ilan, why don't you ask Abe? Ilan, are you there? Ilan says,
yes,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
here. Here, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay, so hi Abe. Thanks for sharing. Hi, thanks for sharing your story. I can't well, I could put my camera on now, but I'm on my phone right now, but I'll put it on a bit later. But I had a question. I'm just interested to know if you or somebody in your family ever tried to explore, reclaiming the property you had. I remember you were talking about your father's description of life in Jaffa, and I didn't quite hear if you lived in Jaffa before or if it was somewhere else. But I'm aware that there is an NGO that tries to sort of link properties of Palestinians who were living in Palestine at that time to families currently. So I'm interested to know if you made any efforts to try to reclaim that property. Thanks.
Thank you, Ilan. No, we didn't make any effort because we thought it is something that the Israel have to acknowledge first that we own the property, because as you would know, there is a law in Israel about absentee property owners. And once they become absentee, they claim it and people live in it, they put whoever, and there are people living there in our property. I'm not sure, I thought it's going to be part of a final solution in terms, and that's where the right of return for the Palestinians. And I understand that Israel will never allow any Palestinian back there, but they're not offering compensation at the same time. And they never talked about it since 48 until now. They don't, as you would know from the history, they erased 500 villages to ensure that Palestine never come back. And the houses are not there. But our house is still in Jaffa, and Israel has not, Israeli government I'm talking about here, has not offered compensation to those Palestinians. And they're just bad luck. So I'm happy to connect. I'm happy to connect with NGOs who would pursue that option.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Ilan has also lived in Israel, but these experiences of Abe, Ilan, how do you want to ask him more about his experiences?
Well, no, I mean, it's, Abe has provided, a very moving account. I mean, yeah, I lived in Israel, for a few years. I was actually even born in Israel. And I did my master's degree in conflict resolution there, as Abe knows. And it's kind of surreal because, Abe talks about rockets, and the summer that I graduated from my master's degree in 2014 was actually the time of rockets landing in Israel. So, obviously it's just terrible that these things happen. And, we obviously need to work together to make sure that people, as many lives as we can save as possible, we need to work together to achieve that. But yeah, I'll follow up with you, Abe, on this property thing. I mean, I can't remember the name of the NGO, but I think it might be something like The Key or something like that, maybe in Arabic.
Okay.
And I'll see if I can get that link for you. But I'm listening, and I'll come and switch my camera on in a minute. Thanks.
Thank you. Elaine and I had connected last week, and there is a lot in common between us. So I'm glad that I have Elaine on board.
Okay, so Abe, now we've reached Australia.
Yeah.
We've come to Australia now.
I arrived in Australia, and it's just, I thought I'm here to finish my education and possibly go back home. It's still, the idea of going back home was still alive and present at the time. I enrolled in technical college here, TAFE, for English classes. And 6 months on, I decided, I think I want to live here. I'm not going back. The idea of going back has disappeared from my head. I just loved Australia. What Australia given me, I couldn't dream anywhere else that I would get that. The stability, the peace, the harmony, the respect, the human rights, my basic rights and the human rights completely respected. I'm respected as a human, the whole thing. So I just said, I was a stranger in Jordan. I'm here, I feel more at home, because this is really what I fight for, about my freedom, my human rights. And they are justice, and you get it here. And that's something I really appreciate and value coming here. I talked about the three women who influenced my life. The first was my mom. When I was studying English, I finished my English and enrolled in social welfare course. 3 months into the course, I found it difficult to continue because the teaching was different than the one I learned or grew up with. I learned to read the textbook, know it by heart, answer the questions, and that's it. I was not used to writing essays, assignments, and all of that discussion, or have an opinion. My opinion was anything outside the textbook is not considered wrong. And I wanted to give up, drop out. And Miss Harrison, I remember her name, the head of the school, called me. And she's a Jewish lady. She said, "What's the problem, Abe?" I said, "Look, my English is not that good and I need maybe to go back and do more." She said, "No, your English is nothing wrong with your English. You're staying and I'll make sure you continue your course." And I said, I tried to resist. She did not give me the option to resist. And she said, "You're coming to see me every Friday. I want to make sure you continue this course until the end." And sure enough, every Friday she would make at lunchtime, she would call me and sit down with me and have a chat and make sure that I'll continue. And I finished it, thanks to her. So that's really something I would always say thanks to her.
But did you stay in touch with her?
She was an old lady, and I think she passed away not long after. Okay. Yeah.
But tell me, sir, Abe, now you came in here. What about your siblings? What are they doing?
I had 3 siblings who were here before me. The other siblings were scattered all over the Middle East. They went to Kuwait, Dubai, and different countries in Saudi Arabia. We were scattered all over the place, and like all Palestinians, not my family, because we wouldn't get any work in Jordan. Jordan is not rich in anything, so we had to go and seek employment in the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia. So we were scattered, and that was the reality of our people.
But did they continue their education?
The youngest two, yes. One of them finished engineering, and the other one is draftsman, architect.
Okay. And the elder ones did not.
The older one's not.
Okay.
He did not finish his schooling. When he came to Australia, he decided to work, and he continued working.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now,
So-
when you came in here, you came to Sydney. You came
I
into
came to Sydney. I stayed in Sydney. I could not see myself living anywhere else. It was, yeah, it is fantastic city, and I think it was the right choice.
Okay.
The opportunity is much wider. Yeah. So yeah, I started work when I came to Sydney, and in library, study English at night, and then the minute I start to have my English improve, I'll just give you an idea about my English. I did study English in my high school as a second language, and I thought I was good at it. When I arrived at Sydney Airport, the customer officer asked me a few questions, and I just stared at him. And he said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Do you speak English?" And he just laughed. I said, "Well, because Australian English is not the same as the British English we learn. So it's completely different language."
Yes, that's for sure. Each of these places have their own English, if you call that. No, but
Yes.
one photograph we missed out on, Abe. This one was, I mean, who all are there in that? You let me know. This one we missed out on.
This is my family in Irbid in Jordan. If you look at it, yeah.
Now the girl on the right, the girl on the right is your.
Yeah, I'm on the right, yes.
No, the girl is on them because sometimes in this the mirror imaging happens.
Okay, there's the girl. There is Etaf.
Yeah.
The next to her, Anam. She was in Saudi Arabia with her husband. And this is Samir. That's his son is here with us. And this Efaf, my third oldest sister. And then me. And then my two younger brothers.
Okay.
The baby was my oldest sister's baby.
But which year would this be?
The eldest one is at the back.
No, so this picture would be taken in which year?
The picture would have been taken back in 65, I would say. No, sorry, it would be much earlier, in the early 60s. I was about 9 or 10 at the time.
But you couldn't find other pictures from that period. That would have been nice to see what Jordan was like at that time.
We didn't have access to cameras readily, so the photos were scarce. This was done by someone we called to take the photo for us.
Okay. So now you've finished your education in Sydney and life starts.
In Sydney, I finished my social work, but I had a job in the accounts department in the railways. And I was doing really well there, but at the same time, I applied for mediation job, which I did. I did get the job in mediation. And I started working part-time mediation, but I still kept my full-time job. That was back in 82. I finished my course. 83, I was employed as a mediator. I continued working in my full-time job in the accounts department until 89, when I resigned and did my business, started my own business for 2 years. Then I decided to go into child protection.
But this we moved very fast, Abe. We've moved very fast. Now
Yes.
you have to tell us when you came in here, how you integrated with the society in general, with people, all those things. That should be an interesting thing to know.
It is. Look, when I first came here in Australia, I think within about 1 year, I was asked to go and have a dialogue with a Catholic priest and a Jewish rabbi. And I'm not a religious person, but I know a lot about religion. And we did have a dialogue, and that was my first ever meeting with a Jewish person. And it was very interesting. It was unsettling initially, uncomfortable, but I did. So it was very, I will always remember that experience. The reason they got me there in that panel, in those days, the priest used to go around houses looking at doors and saying, "How are you? I'm just coming here to say hi and have a cup of coffee with you to say everything is okay." And I thought that was really fantastic idea, people coming and looking at your door asking you, "How are you?" And it was fantastic. And I got to know the priest really well. And that's when he said, "Come and have a chat with my friend, the rabbi," because he found out I was Palestinian and all of that. And that's when we started dialogue. It didn't last long, but nevertheless, it was a start.
But if that first, someone tells you that so and so is a rabbi, he's Jewish. What is the first thought that comes into your mind? Is there any? Does your past come back to you? Does anything come back to you?
It did. It did come back to me, and I said, "Is it right for me to go and have a talk with them or anything?" But I have the inquisitive nature. I open doors that I don't know what's behind those doors. Nevertheless, I still open it. I'm not afraid of anything. That's my nature. If I want to know something and I see something, I've joined many different groups, by the way, in Sydney. Mm-hmm. From all religions, from all walks of life. I joined them and just to get to know them. And it's good for me. Knowledge is really, I wouldn't say power in the same way that people want power, but it is good for me to know about the others. I found myself learning more about myself, much more than learning about the others.
Well, the important thing is that you were not really, that baggage of the past was not really something which was going to affect your present. That is how you were looking at it.
Yeah, exactly. Look, the past was still there, but I never really allowed it to stand between me and life. I have very strong mind, and I do know how to self-care. And that's how I survived. I look at things differently. I don't see them. That's why, when I came and become mediator, I always look at the positive side of everything. My experience taught me something. And what I learned from that experience is not to hate, but to find out why.
To reach that point is also not easy for everyone.
No, I don't admit that everyone will find the same way or deal with it in the same way I have. I adjusted.
No, but I'm sure you've met other people who've lived through the similar situation that you lived through. You must have spoken to them. How are they looking at it? How are they dealing with it?
I met a few people from Jordan here in Sydney, and they were still very angry, full of hate. When I tried to ask them to come with me to the Jewish Palestinian dialogue group, they will not even allow it they will not entertain it at all. they said, how could you?
Mm.
They all, I know a few, until today, I still see them. And they will not join me. They
Yeah,
appreciate so much.
and this is not something that you can really change. And I mean, it's something that everyone takes differently too.
It is. And I think Ilan would know what I'm talking about, and was David as well. I mean, when we had the Gaza war back in 2014, and the doctor who lost his children right in front of him, he wrote a book, I Shall Not Hate. And I do relate a lot to that book, to his story. Because, I mean, I'll give you a story about that I've learned a lot from. A Jewish Holocaust survivor arrived in New York airport, and the custom officer asked him, won't you hate Hitler for what he done to you? He said, no, I won't hate him, because if I hate him, I bring him with me.
Yep.
And that's something that I've learned a lot from that.
But it's a difficult point to get to. I'm sure it's very difficult to get to.
It is very difficult, but then there is a reason. And if I can change that myself within the circle I have, then I've done my job.
Yep.
I might not change everything. And I always said it to my Jewish friends, I'm not here to solve the Middle East problem. I'm here to show the world that Jews and Palestinians can live together, can coexist.
No, but
And
were there,
that's the purpose.
but were there points of time when that there was that negativity, hate, or anything at some point of time in life earlier?
Earlier, I would not have even thought about meeting a Jewish or Israeli or anybody when I was there. To be honest, I always called them the monsters I want to kill. That's all. That's the highest of my emotions. I never felt sorry for when I hear an Israeli got killed by Palestinian or anybody. Never. I do now. It's just not the same. Everybody loses, regardless they win, even if they win. We're all losers in war.
No, that's why I was that person from the Israeli army that you said you met. I'm saying that individual also, how much of is he really in that situation a Jew or an Israeli, or is just a person who's been put into a position to do something? I mean, there's someone else who controls it. How much does he have? So as an individual, that person, should you have anything against that individual, is what basically you've come down to. That it's not you not have anything against individuals.
Yeah, but let me put it this way, and I always say it and repeat it. The Jewish people have suffered so much through the Holocaust and through the centuries, living in different communities. And I thought, if anyone knows what suffering is about and what it feels like to be in that situation, ask a Jew about it. And yet, I found the Israeli government and army inflicting the same pain and suffering they suffered themselves. How that could be? If I know what it feels like to be in pain and suffering and persecuted, why do I persecute someone else?
That's the thing. I think that's how, who would react in what way, you don't know. I mean, that's the point. I think that's what we have to look at it, is that one individual reacting in a certain manner and taking the whole system in that direction. Who knows? I mean, it's not something
It's true, but it's still, for me, I went to the Holocaust Museum in Sydney, and I was really moved by the suffering and the pain and all of that history of the Holocaust. And when we finished the tour, there was a question and time for us to ask questions. And I asked questions. I've learned a lot, that nobody should ever be in that situation ever again. But I said, that's my lesson. I wonder what the Israeli government lesson that they learned from the Holocaust. And I didn't get the answer.
Definitely, that's an answer that you would need.
Yeah. Because I know I don't deny the pain and suffering of the Jews. But I think I need the Israeli government, and I'm talking a differentiate between Jews and Israelis from the Israeli government actions and behavior, because they're two different things.
But now tell me, Abe, now you've started a job, but what age are you at that point of time?
When I start working here,
yeah,
I started immediately, almost when I was 21.
Okay. So basically, okay. So now you're growing up in Sydney. In a way, I mean, at 21 is also growing up. So not that old. Yeah. So what is it like now? What is the atmosphere like? I mean, because the Sydney that you see today, we'll have to also understand from you what has changed there, because you've seen a change definitely as a city growing in so many years. But at that point of time, what was the Sydney that you grew up in? I'm still saying growing up.
Look, I mean, when I first arrived in Sydney, just to show you how much peaceful and secure in Sydney, we did not lock our doors. The doors always open. The screen door was only to keep flies away, nothing else. And that's something that what Sydney used to be. We used to walk the street, it was safe and everything else. Of course, things changed since. And we grew up, it's becoming more.
It was not going to happen in one sentence that things have changed. We will take you through those changes. But right now you're staying with your brother.
I lived with my brother the first 3 years.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of family? He's married.
He was single at the time when I arrived. Then the two older brothers who were here, they went back to Jordan and they got married and returned back in 74.
Mm-hmm.
And they returned back with their wives. And I stayed with them for another year when I decided to get married myself and move out. So I moved out to my own place, rented apartment. And I stayed in the apartment for about 6 months before I bought my first house.
Not bad.
Back in 77.
Mm-hmm.
I stayed in rental for about 2 years. So I bought my first house in 77. We stayed there, and we went to Jordan as well for a holiday. And that was my first visit after 5 years of arriving in Australia.
So, but where did you meet your wife?
I met her here in Sydney.
Okay.
We met, her brother used to work with me. We used to work in the same place. And he used to bring the most beautiful Bosnian dish. He used to call himself Yugoslav because it was Yugoslavia then. Mm-hmm. And he used to share his food with me. And I loved it. And I said, I wish I'm living with your family because the food is so good. And he said, I'll invite you to my place and have dinner together. So he did. And we went there and I introduced his sister, his wife. And things moved from there. We started a relationship and we got married about 1 year later.
So the relationship was with her or with the food?
Well, it was started with the food, of course. I wouldn't deny it. It was fantastic food.
Okay, so you got married there, and then, so when did okay,
so we moved together in 75. We had our first child in 76, sorry, it was early 75, and we had our child in 75 at the end of the year.
That was that Muhammad or someone else?
No, with my wife.
No, Muhammad is
Muhammad's mother, yes.
No, Muhammad is here. He was born there. He's the one who was born there, or he's a
no. He was a second.
Okay.
That was a girl, first one, and we thought that we only needed. Muhammad should not listen to this.
Muhammad, you keep. Is there some way to? One way we can mute him, but how do we stop him from listening? Muhammad, you close your ears. Yeah.
Yeah. Now what happened is really we did. I thought we want only one child at the time, but of course my wife said, "Look, we need a brother or sister for her." 5 years later, we did have Muhammad there. He was born in 81.
What is your daughter's name?
Janana.
Janana.
Yeah.
Okay.
And 5 years later, we have another one, Samira, decided another that, and that's when we said that's it. 3 more than enough.
But do we have pictures of them? Did you send any pictures or not?
I didn't. Should have.
Should have.
Yeah.
Should have.
Sorry.
No, so that should be very nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, no. So we had the 3 children there, and they're doing very well. Muhammad is really, as you would know, he's doing.
Well, we take him in. We'll ask him also. But up to now, but what are you doing at that stage? At what kind of work are you doing?
At the time I was still working in the accounts department as accounts payable department. I was the head of a team at the time. What happens? I train my team to do any job within that department. So if anyone's sick on holidays or anything, I can get one of my team to replace that person immediately. So it was a good job, but I was still, was very ambitious. I didn't want to stick with one job and that's it. And my wife didn't like me changing or doing anything else. She was happy for me to stay 9 to 5 job, Monday to Friday. And that's something that it became quite a problem for both of us, because I really was looking, because I had mediation, I wanted to pursue mediation as well as social work, different, away from accounts. So I think Muhammad has got his hand up.
He has his hand up.
Yeah.
Yes, Muhammad, please come in. But he's not put his video on, is it?
Yeah, I'm here. No, I didn't. I actually never put my hand up at all. But
your mother wants you to say something. You must say something. But are we going to see you, or are we just going to hear you?
No, I'm in my PJ, so I'm.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, that doesn't matter. I'm sure your father has seen you in them and without them also. So I don't think that should be a worry.
But I think one of the most fascinating things I've learned tonight is that I was a really good mistake. Is,
no, you were not mistaken. It was a plan.
No, he's happy that you're here.
Of course. I was a good mistake.
It's all destined, Mohammed. It's not in your hand. You just had to be here, so you were here.
Of course.
Yeah.
But at this, I mean, the fact of living in Sydney with the people, what is the kind of atmosphere that you have around you? Who are the people that you have around you?
I think I was more interested in the freedom that I found myself in, and adjusting to accept that freedom was something that, how I put it, just something I was not familiar with. And it's like someone who has been walking in the desert and all of a sudden found civilization. Don't know where to start, which part of the civilization take, the food, the water, the pace, the shade, all of those sort of things. It's just something that I really wanted to know a bit more. And I think that's when my activism started. More in the 80s than anything else. And that's when I met a woman who has profound impact on my work as a mediator. And she's again Jewish, and Stella Cornelis, God rest her soul. She was the pioneer in conflict management in Sydney, in Australia actually. And she was one of the first people who pioneered conflict management in Australia. And she used to run training courses, and I did one of the workshops with her, and we connected. And she became my mentor for another 10 years or longer. Sorry, about over 20 years. We stayed connected with each other. We met many times in her house and discussed. And she told me about her story and her background. And that's something we connected through that. Until her death back in 2007, I think it was, when I talked to her the day before she passed away, and she said to me, just remember one thing. You can have this and that. Never say this or that. And that's something really, it sank into my head. You don't need to have options of one or the other. We can always have peace and security and justice and friendship and all of that. We can have it all if we want to. It's not about this or that. And that's something really I learned a lot from that. So it's really fantastic sort of opportunity for me there to learn from her all those 20 odd years. And she left a great legacy behind her. And that's when I met David in the 2010, I think.
But again, that's like you move really fast, Abe. This
No,
is like
okay,
you're growing up. I mean, yeah, I mean, this is years of life in a city. There's so much more. It's not just work. There's not just work. There's so much more.
Honestly, no, I mean, the early years, it was work and family life and a bit of activism, not that much. I did work with the Bosnian community. I got them established and helped them to buy a center, to build a center for themselves. I was more working with ethnic groups in terms of really, I wouldn't say, I mean, I was the only non-Bosnian member of the group. Some of them resented me being there, and some others welcomed me completely with open arms. And I worked with them for many, many years, over 20 years, helped them build up themselves and organize. And they used to be part of the group doing fundraising for them. So that was my work mostly around that area on those 20 years. So it wasn't really, I wasn't doing much in terms of activism with the Jewish community. I used to meet here and there, but not to the great deal that happened in the 90s and onwards. It was more about work and work and work. Because as a new migrant, you want to establish yourself and you're busy with work, trying to save some money and buy yourself a good life. And that's really what I was busy doing at the time. And I was doing 2 or 3 jobs sometimes, working. And I did work hard during the years. I needed to look after my family, give them the education they want, and the life they needed. And that really was my priority, especially being the only one working in that household. And it's just, yeah, I needed to work harder than normal to give them that life that I missed out with my childhood.
But everything is now, everything's perfect. There's, I mean, you don't see any issues around you in terms of the society, the people, nothing.
No, I loved Australia, full stop. I visited almost every city in Australia during my work with the railways. I used to take a trip every year to a different city with my wife and the kids. The kids enjoyed going to the snowy mountain in summer. And we used to have a great time together in those in summer because it's much more beautiful than winter. We used to do trekking in the mountains and see the world there.
I've asked Mohammed to try and take out some pictures, then he can screen share them. I hope he's trying to do that.
Yeah.
Mohammed, are you trying that? It'll be nice to see that. I haven't got those pictures, but I've got one old picture that you sent.
Yeah.
Which I did not share earlier. Let me just see if you can tell me who those are.
That's us four youngest brothers. On the right is my Samir, who is here, and his son is here with us. Then Mahmoud, he is currently in Jordan, in Erbil. Nabil, who is currently in Malaysia, and myself on the left-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
That's me.
No one will even think that person is this one.
Yes, and that was outside our house in Jordan.
But what is that at the back? I mean, this is what hilly area.
That's a mountain sort of thing, and that's the village at the back there, Beteras, and the house is not showing here, but it is on the side. I mean, the pictures I have are hard copy. That's why I didn't show them.
No, you could just take a picture of them. Just
they
a
are
picture
hard
was
copies, yeah.
One picture, camera from your phone also you could have taken it. We could have seen those.
Yes.
Okay. So basically now you're all settled into Australia. You're traveling around Australia. You like the people. You like the place.
Absolutely. I couldn't have made a better decision in my life than the decision of coming here.
But wouldn't that be the same? If you'd gone anywhere, I'm sure with the kind of life that you had seen there, things will always be better.
Look, there's one thing about me. I like to speak my mind out. And in Jordan or any other Arab country, you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a person who would toe the line. And if there is something that I don't like, I like to say it. I can do it here.
But what is it like in Lebanon? How is Lebanon?
It's the same. It's anarchy. It's really anarchy at this point in time. And it's bankrupt state. They have nothing left there. They can't form the government because no government will want to be formed because there's no money to steal. They run out of money. There's not one. Most governments are corrupt in the Middle East.
But why is it like that? What is it about the Middle East that there's always some conflict, something, all these happening? What is it all about?
That's a $1 million question. I think it has a lot to do with the West. The colonials left those governments behind, and they still could protect them. They give them weapons and protect them. If I know someone stole money and invested in my country, you would think you will ask questions. Most of those dictators have stolen the money or the wealth of their countries, invested in Europe and America, and left their countries bare with nothing. That's why you have refugees, terrorism, and all of that. Because those people have nothing to live for. There's no jobs, no future. I can make a future here, but they cannot make the future there.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no investment by the people who, they spend more money on weapons to protect themselves rather than to defend the country. They pick up wars against each other just for fun.
Okay, so basically, I think what we have a better picture to see rather than this picture of the Middle East that you're showing us. Let's see that instead.
Yeah.
This is a nicer picture to look at.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the three children. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Muhammad is there on the left, and Samir sitting on the lap of Jinana.
But this again would be what year? This would be how old?
This one, it would be in after about 86, 87.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because Samira was about 1 year old there, which is she born 85, so 86.
Okay. But then what kind of work were you doing then in terms of the community mediation? You said you were doing a lot of that.
I was doing on-call mediator at the time with the Community Justice Center, and my full-time job with the State Trial Authority in the accounts department. Mm-hmm. They're the two jobs I was working with. And when I talk about mediator, we used to do a mediation after hours, mm-hmm. which is after 6 o'clock or on the weekend. And that's how I used to do my mediation.
Okay. But Rosalia has a question for you. Rosalia, please ask Abe. Yes, Rosalia. Rosalia is in Canada. She's in Montreal. And she also works with the Canadian government. Yes, Rosalia, you can unmute yourself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abe. Your story is really quite amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Actually, I wanted to hear, you started talking about that you were doing mediation after hours. I would like to hear more about that. But yes. I just wanted to go back. I know that from what I understand, I know you were in Jordan in 1948 and you were a child. But I was just wondering, because I've been reading a lot about the conflict and at the time when they were trying to sign the first truce, when the first mediator, first UN mediator, Bernadette Folk, when he came in, when he got involved, I was just wondering, just before when he was killed, do you have any recollection of that period and how it was? And I know you were in Jordan, and I know that happened in Israel, but if you could give us a bit of an insight on that.
Yeah, I was born after that. I wasn't born in 48.
Okay.
And I only from what I read in the history. Look, I think there's one thing for sure, and this has been proved day after day. When the Israeli leaders decided to establish the State of Israel, they didn't have Palestine as a state between the river and the sea. It's been always their plan not to have Palestine. No matter what mediation, no matter what United Nations intervention, even till now, as you would know, the settlement building is creeping further and further in the West Bank. And that's to frustrate the establishment of any state. I'm not sure if you have seen the deal of the century that Kushner proposed as a solution. And if you look at the map of the proposed state of Palestine, I mean, even Swiss cheese would look much nicer. Nobody could. Sorry?
That's you only. That's your echo.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely a joke. And we talk about not a state, we talk about municipal councils. Even municipal council in Sydney would have more power and authority than the state that they proposed. It was not a state. It's really, the Palestinians negotiated with Israel over 20 years with Oslo. And as they negotiated, the land that they're negotiating around gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Who would negotiate 20 years with no outcome? And the Palestinians did. And that's the sad part. Israel governments didn't want peace where Palestinian state could be established. They want peace by having the land with no people. They want the whole land. They don't want people in that land except Jewish. And that is sad reality.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
But I think we have to move from this aspect to a better part of it. I got another picture from Mohammed. I would like to see that instead. The Middle East will be there. All these issues will be there.
Yes.
But,
yes. Yeah, they are my kids. That would be in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Janana is there with her child, Muhammad at the background, and Samira on the side, on Janana's right-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think what we need to do is, now this your experiences as you relate them is one thing. Let's understand from Muhammad what he remembers of you telling him. Muhammad, what do you remember of Abe telling you?
Well, growing up, my father tried to include us in a lot of his background, his history, the culture, because understand I grew up in a mixed cultural family. So I had the Middle Eastern culture on one side, then the European culture on the other side. So I was kind of torn between the two. And so growing up, I took more towards my European, the Bosnian side, where I can speak fluent Yugoslav. Whereas Arabic, for some reason, I just never took to it. I think because I was around my Bosnian family much more. So in all fairness to my father, he tried his hardest to get us involved in our Arabic culture, in our history, family history. But unfortunately, I mean, me as a young person, I didn't take to it as I did with my mother's side. So I never really, I guess, I wouldn't say interested, because that's a very harsh way to put it. But I never was entwined to learn about that side for some reason. I couldn't tell you why. I really don't know why. But in my later years, in my teens, that's when I started to get really interested about my Arab heritage and learn more about it, especially after 2001, the bombings in America, when I had to really choose sides, because people kind of forced me to choose sides at that point. So that's when I really kind of reached out to my dad and really trying to find out a bit more about our history and ask questions. And in a roundabout way, I learned so much from my father in regards to my religion and my culture without him even telling me, because I actually saw a man who acted rather than spoke all the time. And what I realized growing up is that I learned so much from him, from his actions and what I saw from him growing up, and the meetings I used to go with him to. Subconsciously, I was there but I'd soak it all in. And that really came to fruition later on in life when I was much older and really understood what my father was about, who he was, and what he always did, not only at work, but in his spare time with the community. And I think that's what led me to do what I do today, which is, in that same kind of footsteps.
You can tell us a little more about, because I have, of course, read on your LinkedIn profile, but you can tell us the such interesting things that you're doing. So you can tell us more about that.
Well, yeah, I can, I guess. Basically, I've been in humanitarian aid and community development work for the past 15 years, working in about 100 or so countries around the world. Building various projects, orphan villages, boreholes, water stations, and so on and so forth. List goes on, but something I was very passionate in, and I started off in local community work in Sydney, and then from there, that was back in 2005, and then from there expanded to international aid development and projects.
But has that taken you to Jordan and Israel?
So I was actually supposed to visit Palestine in April last year, and a week before our trip, it got cancelled because of COVID. So that was going to be my first time to visit Palestine. I went to Jordan when I was younger. My father sent us there with my mother and my two sisters, and we spent a month or about 3 weeks there in Jordan. And we did try to go to the Palestinian side, but unfortunately, there was just too many checkpoints and too much. We were on the road for about 12 hours and at checkpoints for hours on end. It was hot and we couldn't actually enter, unfortunately. And we just decided to turn back and go back to Jordan.
But Mohammed, your father says he's not very religious. So in terms of the religion, was he able to teach you anything, or there is?
Yeah, at a young age, we went to like Saturday school, and my father taught there. So my father, I think, is being a bit humble. He says he's not religious, but he's someone who is connected with God, and I know he's a man of God. Whether he acts upon it or not, that's something between him and his own. That's his own business, I guess. Not for me to judge or not for me to comment on. Everyone's got their own connection with their Lord, who they believe in, and they practice their belief in their own way, I guess. I chose a more, I wouldn't say orthodox, but a more active approach to my religion. But that, once again, like I said, that was all because of my foundation that my father built when I was a young kid. And like I said, although I didn't take to it at a young age, later on in life, I realized how important that was to me. And then after the September 11 attacks, I was kind of forced to learn about my religion because I was a bit embarrassed to not know, about me or about my background when people were asking me, why are your people bombing, America? And for me, that was a turning point in my life.
No, but tell me, the Arabic, did you pick up Arabic, or that is still not something you've been able to pick up?
I can get around Arabic, so I can understand, but I'm embarrassed and not confident enough to speak. I can read and write, but that's something I taught myself in my early 20s. And
No, because that's one thing that I've always thought about people who follow Islam and they do not know Arabic. It must be very difficult because you're relying on someone else interpreting things for you, which is the same thing with Hinduism also. I mean, I'm saying that here also those texts, we can't read those. So now either you believe someone else, whatever they tell you, but that is a bit of an issue when it comes down to religion, I feel. So I think
it is, but I mean, the translations that are out there are very, very well done. And there are trusted translations that you can go off. Now, obviously, it won't capture the context as it would in the Arabic language. However, the words, in the Quran, majority, like I do understand the words. When you start piecing sentences together, it's a bit hard for me to understand. But there are certain words and certain attributes of the Quran that you understand that you in Arabic that I taught that I learned over the years that make a big difference. And when you hear a word in Arabic, as opposed to something in translating English, it has a much heavier impact or better understanding in the Arabic language, because that's the language that was revealed.
Yeah. No, in any case, I think, I mean, every language has a certain meaning of a word which definitely might not even be available in other language. Because if you pick up maybe languages here, you can't really literally translate a lot of words. You can try, but not exactly in that same way. So I don't know about the Arabic English translation. I can't say too much about that. But I think that is something you should, I think, be totally fluent in, and then it'll be good. Then you can teach us also.
I mean, to add, in terms of when I said I'm not a religious person, it's not that I don't believe in religion. It's just I don't carry the flag around with me showing the world I'm religious or not. For me, religion is about your actions, your behavior with the others and yourself. It's not about teaching the others to like me or not, to like my religion or not. I don't, for me, it's a private, personal thing between me and my God. It's not something for me to judge people if they are good or bad. That's what I meant. I'm not religious. I don't go out there with religion, a flag, say me, I'm Muslim. I'm proud of being Muslim, yes. I have connection with God. I believe in God. I believe in his teachings and all of that. But I don't put it on the upfront of me, saying this is what Islam is about or whatever. If we discuss Islam, I'm happy to discuss it, but I'm not going to bring it to the middle just because I want you to convert or whatever.
No, but tell me, no, but Abe, but in 2001 with the World Trade Center situation, did things change in Australia with you in terms of the people they're looking at you, talking to you? Did things change?
I think I'll go back further. On the 1972, when I traveled to Australia, I traveled on Japanese airline from Lebanon. And that was the Olympic when the the Israeli athletes were taken hostage and some of them got killed. And there was a bit of security issues with any Palestinian going into any airline. And if you remember, that was the time when the airline hijacking and all of that. And I remember when I was in the airline traveling, there were two security guys sitting not far from us, me and another Palestinian. And the pilot actually came to us and just have a chat to see what we're thinking. And it's the first time ever a pilot came out to talk to me, and that was fun. And it was good. I mean, I experienced that the minute I arrived in Sydney, there was a bit of backlash at that time against, I mean, nobody could say them. I couldn't say I'm Palestinian. I only can say I'm Jordanian, because Palestinian was a dirty word. Mm-hmm. And the same thing, Muslim became a dirty word in 9/11. And I really reacted strongly about that. And I did always protested. This is not Islam. They just criminals, did the criminal act, they murders, they killed innocent people, full stop. And I always carried the motto, violence has no religion. Everybody in every religion, or even atheist or communist, committed the crimes too. But we don't call them communist terrorism. We don't call it Catholic terrorism. We don't, I mean, Northern Ireland have seen conflict all their years. And we did not just caught by religion. I think I object to being lumped, or my religion being accused of committing crimes that I'm innocent of. It's not the religion that commits crimes, it's the person. the person should not be judged by his religion, should be judged by his or her own actions and behavior, full stop.
No, but did it change relationships at that point of time?
Look, I think I did not hate anybody or put myself in a position where I'm going not to talk to this or talk to that. Actually, I became more active, similar to what my son said, Mohammed, about being more aware, and I started to be more active about separating the religion from the behavior or the action of some people. I always said it's a matter of interpretation. Every religion has so many different groups and sects and dominations because they interpret their Bible or their Quran or their Old Testament or their holy books, each their own way. And every interpretation is different than the other. And we talk about the same book.
That's what I say. Interpretation is the main thing. So that is why you have to know the language. The language is the important part. That if someone who can actually, on a fair level, be able to interpret it, and then because we see, don't we see in the legal world, interpretation of basic law keeps happening up till the Supreme Court. So there are so many ways to look at the same thing, and then which one is how someone looks at one word. One word changes everything.
Absolutely. And I think as a lawyer, you would know that your interpretation of the same act is different to someone else. And you both could be one defending the victim, one defending the perpetrator, and you're both using the same act to defend your client.
Exactly.
And the same thing goes with religion. People just have different interpretation to really serve their own interest.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was just telling. Yeah, that's what I was telling Mohammed. That's exactly where I was coming from. That I think it's important for people to actually read the, I mean, I learn Arabic to that extent when you can actually debate it. And then I think a lot of a fair interpretation by people who are totally unconnected with the political aspect of it, to be able to do that, I think will be important. But if you've looked at war from one end, Kato is here. Kato's obviously his mother and his family have seen bombing in Hiroshima and all. So he's also seen, I mean, grown up in that kind of environment. Kato, you have something to ask Abe? You'll have to unmute again. While you were pressing that, I pressed it again. you'll have to do it. Yeah.
So I had to pop out, but came back about 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago. I agree with what I have heard for the last couple of minutes, where you mentioned that there are different views, interpretation of even the same book. And that's exactly in line with what I have been feeling over the last couple of years. And so I'm not really asking you or sort of putting a question to you. I'm just trying to sort out my own brain.
Look, but Kato, what I was getting at is what Abe, of course, has seen. He's been part of a war in a way. I mean, he's seen all that happening. You have directly not seen it, but you've been the next generation who's heard about it. So how do you look at the whole thing?
Well, the Vikram is referring to our conversation, which I don't know how many of you have heard, but my mother was a survivor of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, and most of her, she was a schoolgirl, 18, 16, 17, something like that. Most of her classmates were killed almost instantly. And what I found quite resonating to myself from what you said was that she didn't really talk about her experience to other people. She kept it to herself. Maybe there are a couple of reasons. but she talked it fairly openly within the family, which meant to myself and my younger brother. So it started as, I think the earliest time that I can recall was I was 10 and my brother was probably 7, right? And she was telling what she had experienced the first hand. That was a horrifying thing there. And she kept that from time to time, probably out of sudden she started telling it. Very interesting thing is that you said a couple of times your emotion became numb, right? Which was I've heard also from other people who have experienced, right? And what it is that your system just shut up functioning, responding it, and put something there, right? And not even tears coming, right? Again, I noted that when you saw your father, you didn't cry, right? There's no, weeps, no tears came out. That's also what we observe. By the way, I have been studying clinical psychology for the last 3-5 years, right? And I have been assisting one person who is recovering from PTSD. So it's something that I could link to what I have found from my sort of clients, patients, and as well as the people, friends, people I care, and also my family. And going back to what I have started realizing about my mother was that she kept out of sudden she started talking about her experience, right? But only to my younger brother and myself, right? And not to any other person there. Right? And that's probably kept her some stability in her mind, right? So she didn't have to keep it, right? And that continued even after she went into the stage of the mild dementia. Right? That was, I was a bit surprised, right? And at that stage, she had forgotten about her husband. She couldn't distinguish me from her brother. And her brother had passed away 30 years ago, right? So she was complete chaos, right?
Yes.
But when she started talking again, and to me, it started again, right? It's like a record player started playing, right? And I now start probably not realizing, but I start understanding her state of mind better. Another reason why she didn't talk loudly about her experience is that but in the city of Hiroshima, literally tens of thousands of people have experience. Right? It's not like I was caught up in a traffic accident. No, yeah. So when everybody in the community are going through the same difficulties or whatever the challenges, they don't talk about that. They just and get on with life. And I understand that the other part of Japan who had also had a quite difficult time during the last war. The people in the community kept, and 60 years later, people started telling, right, because they thought if they don't tell, then that story will disappear in the history. So they started talking, they started writing, they started painting, right? And there are two sort of one, right, that came back, the memory came back. And some of them have suffered a lot, but some of them said they again, they re-experience, they have overcome, right? And gradually they remained to the stable condition and regained the peaceful sort of state of mind. So I think whether it is what you have described or what my mother or other people in Japan have experienced, or what this 9/11 had caused American people, there are lots in common.
Yes, that's true. I want to add here, being in Australia and being in peace, harmony, feeling secure, all of that, giving me the vision to start talking about those experiences. I don't believe that I have suffered a long-term trauma or depression or whatever, never been in that position. I think as well as I have come to realize one thing, I'm not the only victim of that war. The Israelis themselves are victims of that war as well. The Israelis anti-Palestinians share the same trauma their government is putting us into. It's really the behavior of the politicians and the government and the army. And that's why I find so much connection with the Jewish people here and Israelis, or some of the Israelis I've met, that it's really, we have something in common. And that's something we need to work on.
No, but tell us about this peace monuments and all that you want to set up. That's an interesting thing that you have.
Okay, well, last year I delivered the paper at the conference, Rethinking Peace, at the University of New England. And I was scratching my head, what subject do I write about? So I thought about visible peace. Visible peace, if we walk any city in the world, you find war memorials, statues of war heroes, everything that reminds us of the war. Even the Hiroshima Peace Museum is about the war as well. And everything is around us about war. And yet we all talk about peace. And we don't see any symbolic of peace anywhere in our cities. If you look around, what do you see? There's no statue, there's no monument, there's no hero, nothing. We talk about it. And something we don't see, we don't talk much about or really relate to. We try to stab at bullying in the schoolyard. We stand the domestic violence. We stand at everything else. But what's there to remind us of what that looks like? So a friend of mine, Victoria, who is the global ambassador for the World Peace Flame, and her and I, we sat down together and said, we need to show the world what peace is about. And having a monument in public place for people to go there and reflect and ask themselves, what does peace look like? What does it mean to me? What does it mean to someone else? How do I find peace? Where is it? Ask that sort of question, which we don't ask. And that's something we want to really show the world about it, that there is peace and peace is there. By putting a monument in our streets, in our squares, that may actually start us to think about it, not once in a while when there's a war, but anytime. We pass that statue, we see there is something to remind us of peace. And that's really what the whole idea. We find it difficult. The first thing they tell us, oh, we have too many monuments. But this is not a monument. It's a living thing for us to think. I always tell them, you're telling us our boys and soldiers go out to war to give us peace. When they come back, they find the statues of war, the statue of war heroes, and war museums. What about the peace they fought for? Where is it? We don't see it. I'll give you another story and to show you how difficult it is to sell a peace story. There was a demonstration about PDS outside one of our local councils. The Palestinian and Jewish were there. The demonstrations are protesting. I was there with a Jewish friend of mine. We were standing next to a journalist who was covering the story. And I jokingly said to her, would you be interested in writing about a Palestinian and the Jewish standing by side and being friends? She said, not really. They're waiting for a fight to happen there to cover the story. They're not interested in a peace story. And that's really, it shows you how much the media and what we are saying to everybody about conflict and conflict sells story. It should not be that case. And that's why we want to do those monuments.
And develop a culture of peace.
Absolutely. We want people to start talk about peace at the dinner table, everywhere.
I'm starting that with the culture of mediation. I want people to talk about mediation.
Yes.
You have reached that stage when you have to talk about the peace. Let me do the mediation part. Those conversations have to happen. But Ilan has something. Ilan has something. Yes, Ilan.
Thanks, Vikram. So I have to go in a few minutes. I have a training session with
I'm sorry, Ilan. You're such a busy person we've got. We're honored. How many minutes more can you give us?
No, it's my honor. So I wanted to say actually on the issue of the peace monument. So my sister lives in a city called Brighton, Brighton and Hove on the south coast of England. And they actually have a monument to peace on the beach. So Brighton, I think, has got a very interesting culture in terms of peace. But I just wanted to say that what Abe said when he was talking about, you know, some, I think maybe he said Jordanian friends of his who expressed surprise that he would want to go and speak with the rabbi. And then he was speaking about, you know, Jews who hate Hitler and bringing that hate through. So I just wanted to say that really resonated with me, because I think it doesn't really matter what somebody's background is and what somebody's experience is. I mean, Abe obviously was very badly affected by the conflict that really caused him and his family a lot of problems, but he still chose reconciliation and peace and dialogue. You know, myself personally, I didn't have any family members, luckily, who were affected directly by the Holocaust, because my family was already living in the United Kingdom in the early 20th century. So I'm lucky from that perspective. And also, I don't have any family members who were affected by any of the wars that Israel fought with the surrounding Arab nations. And so you know, I can tell you for a fact that there's plenty of people, friends of mine, people I've met along the way who are very anti-Palestinian, very anti-Arab, very anti-Muslim, and they were not affected directly by it. So I think it's interesting how it doesn't seem to matter whether you were affected directly by it or not, but you can always choose reconciliation. You can always choose peace. And I think really what our job as peacemakers is to figure out how we can get people to choose peace rather than choosing suspicion and conflict and hate, basically. So I think the work that Abe has done all throughout his life, you know, especially given the experiences that he's had, the very sad experiences, is really a testament to how all of us can choose to engage in peace and dialogue and respect with people who, you know, we might sort of have political conflicts with. So I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, Abe, thank you so much for sharing your story. And obviously we'll continue the conversation. And
and I know you're very busy, but take 2 minutes out. What is the Jewish or the Israeli perspective or point of view on these issues?
Well, you know, look, all I can say is that it's highly complex. You know, the funny thing they say about Jewish people or Israeli people, you have 2 Israelis in a room and 3 opinions. You know, it's like we can't agree on anything. Everybody has their own very nuanced and very subtle differences of opinions. And you know, that's especially true for the Israeli government. It's a very sort of dysfunctional sort of, you know, institution, as I'm sure most governments are. And, you know, some people say that we need the Palestinians to keep Israel united. You know, I mean, that's kind of like the irony of it, that we sort of, you know, some people say that without that dynamic, then the fault lines, the fractures in Israeli society would be too much and the country would fall apart. So I can't speak for anybody but myself. And I can just tell you that the more you learn about it, you see so much the complexity. And that's why it's so hard for anybody to get their head around it. I mean, I personally feel that it's a political conflict, that it's really about corruption and about people wanting to stay in power and wanting to stay, you know, making money. And so fear and division is a great way to achieve that. And so the only way that we'll be able to combat that is to come together as people and not to be suspicious of each other and to be united in the fact that we want to live our lives in peace with the people who occupy or who live on the same piece of land. So I think, you know, I can only speak for my perspective of being an Israeli citizen, being a Jewish person. I mean, I'm mostly culturally British, but I've lived there for some years, and it's very controversial to even say that we should be talking to Palestinian people. But you know, that doesn't bother me. You know, I will continue to, you know, reach out to people, and I want to hear the Palestinian stories and narrative and perspectives to understand that, to respect that, because it's very important that we understand each other.
Okay. But I really thought, Ilan, what you're really going to do, this is very nice about all this, but I thought you're going to show us a view of the Lake Como at some stage. I think we should put off your video, just show us that view, let everyone see that. Put off your video after 2 minutes, just put it on, show us that, and then you can go. It is not right on your part. Okay.
I can't do it now. Please just Google.
Okay. Go. Okay, go. You go. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Everybody can Google Lake Como.
Okay, yeah, everyone can do that. We can see everything.
I'll do it next time, but
okay,
I do have to go now. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you, Ilan.
It was great to see everyone. Yes, have a lovely evening, have a lovely day, and I hope to see all of you soon. Take care, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
But if David had something, David, why don't you tell us about these peace bells?
Yeah, no, I was just, I know that Abe has this interest in peace monuments, and it's just worth knowing that there are a number of international world peace bells. One of them is here in Canberra. There's another one in an Australian city called Cowra. Now, Cowra was, it's a country town, but it's has a very interesting history because it used to be a prisoner of war camp. And there was a major escape of Japanese inmates during the Second World War. And for some reason, Japan and Australia, because of that incredible incident called the Great Cowra Escape, that town of Cowra has forged this incredible peaceful relationship with Japan. So Cowra is now, it's a small town, but it has an international peace bell. And of course, Canberra does as well. And Rotary is heavily involved in the Peace Bell project. So I agree with Abe, there isn't enough visible support, for peace, but it is there in bits and pieces.
It is. I agree with you, David, and I think my idea is to have it in every square. For us, we need to remind ourselves. I can see where memorials, the statues everywhere. I need to see more of peace things around. And I'm hoping for the museum as well, Peace Museum.
I know. There's actually a Rotary Peace Pole project. There are over 100 schools around Australia have been given these peace poles,
yes.
and that they erect in their schoolyards.
Yes.
And every International Peace Day, they have a celebration around their peace pole. So it's small events, but it is happening. But I think it's a wonderful idea.
It is.
Bob has something to say, but Bob will have to put on his video. Yes, Bob. Bob?
Okay. Yeah.
One second. Go to Bob simply wants to ask something. Yeah. Yeah, Bob.
Abe, thank you so much. It's been a privilege and fascinating to listen to your story. And I think your humility and your ability to engage, particularly given your history and what you've been through, is just staggering. So my question really is, do you feel that today we're closer to engaging in positive conflict dialogue, or do you think we're more entrenched than ever?
Look, I think we are more entrenched and it's not getting any better. If you look at the so-called peace agreements between Israel, the Emirates, UAE, Morocco, and Bahrain, Sudan as well. You look at those countries, they are ruled by dictators. Every single Israeli delegation who led their country's Israeli delegation to those countries to sign the agreements, it's shared by the security officer, by the Mossad chief. And that tells me something, that they are security arrangement rather than peace agreement. Those relationship has always been there. They've been a secret relationship for many, many years, decades, and did not bring peace. The difference now they make in public, do you think it will make peace? It's not. For me, really, if Israel is getting what they want, the Israeli government I'm talking here, they're getting what they want from the Arab world, recognition and cooperation and trade and all of that. Why would they want to give up land? They got what they want. They're not going to give land. And the Palestinian issue will always be there. But instead of being in the forefront, it's forgotten, because now they are concentrating on their relationship and to ensure there's no Arab Spring happening. They don't want freedom for the Arab people. They don't want democracy. They don't want the human rights. The dictators who forged those agreements, they're the ones who are abusing every single human rights issue in the Arab world. Look at the wealth they accumulated. Look at the weapons they buy. For who? If they have no enemy anymore, why are they buying weapons instead of developing the Arab world and stopping the refugees going to the shores of Europe? Because of those refugees find opportunities in their own countries. Would they want to leave? Of course not. But because all their wealth, the wealth of those countries being invested by dictators in Europe and America. And they deprive their own people from this wealth. That's where the problem. The problem is we have dictators and supported by the Europe and America and Israel. They're protected.
So do you feel that? Sorry,
we'll never see peace.
Do you feel that that status quo, it just suits too many people?
It's self-interest. I mean, look at, when we talk about, I mean, look at Saudi Arabia when they killed the journalist Khashoggi in the consulate in Turkey. If that was Russia or China, we wouldn't be taking the same stand. We accepted it. We condoned it. And we're still trading with them. And we're still friends with them. And we still call them allies. That's the level. They don't care about their people. They only care about interest. Trump keeps saying how much money the Saudi crown prince is spending on weapons and showing at a graph of how much money he's getting. Who cares if he killed 1, 2, 10, 100? Look at Yemen. The children die there. It's really a biggest disaster. It's genocide happening. And what we do? We still send weapons there.
Yeah.
So I don't have really, I'm not optimist about what's happening in the Middle East as it is now because of the new alliances that has been formed. And I think we're heading to a war with Iran, and we will manufacture a problem to allow us to drag America into that war.
Okay. Yeah. But Gulan Sinan was saying something. Gulan Sinan, I cut you off.
Very good.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear both the views, especially from Japanese side and station problems. From here, sitting down here, down south in southernmost part of India, territorially, we have not felt the actual impact or effects of war on people. Probably up in the North Delhi, Vikram might know that during partition and even during the Indo-Pakistan war and Bangladesh war, the external aggression, the impact was felt more on the northern states than in the southern states of India. At close, we can say in the Sri Lanka, they had a Tamil Sinhalese problem. We may have felt the impact of the conflict going on over there. Now, from the international perspective, what we have been talking about is the West Asian conflict, the Japanese impact of conflicts. Intriguingly, from this discussion, I noted we are talking of Vikram is talking about promoting mediation culture. Abe is speaking about promoting peace culture. Both are intertwined. See, without a conflict, there is a question of resolution, mediation. That is on a personal level, on a contractual level, so many levels are there. On an international level, without a dispute, there's no talk of peace. Peace is made predominant because of the existence of conflicts. Without a war, without these battles, without these conflicts going around, you will not be talking about peace.
Mm.
It's a very intriguing factor.
It is.
So therefore, what more than focusing on peace, don't you think that managing conflicts is a better way of handling things than talking about peace? Because no society can exist without conflict. No culture can exist without conflicts. Conflicts are inherent. It will happen. So escalation of conflict leading to impact on the community is a different perspective altogether. Don't you think that managing conflicts is a better solution than talking about peace?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think Patricia is here with us. She is from the Economic and Peace Institute in Sydney. You there, Patricia? Yeah. And what they're doing there is they are doing research. There is the cost of war is so high and the benefit is low. Peace is much more profitable than war. And I think for us, if we rely on governments alone to bring peace, we are mistaken. Peace started the community. We need to have the community talk to each other, break those barriers, religious, culture, political barriers, all of that. When we relate to each other as humans, then we start to vote for people who would think like us, rather than vote for the same people who is doing exactly the same of division and thriving on division and war.
But Abe, the problem is that the fact that people can fall into line with people who make you go in that direction, the issue lies in us either not being able to understand it or us not being able to do anything about it. So I don't think that part of it we need to think about, do something about.
I think if we do one step at a time by having, we have here 16, 15 people here, if we start to reach out to the people around us and start really building those relationships, community relationships, that's really important. And that's what I've been doing myself within my own circle, is really, like I said earlier, my work with the Jewish community is not about solving the Middle East problem. It's about showing and proving to people that Jews and Palestinians can be friends, can share a meal, can sit down and enjoy themselves. They can live together. They can coexist.
So that's why I'm saying that,
yeah. If we can do it, everybody can.
No, I'm telling you, that's the thing, that in person to person, there is no issue. It is how it is put across, media does it, or could be people doing it in whatever way they are doing, spreading these things. Because I know I go to anywhere in the world, I have the best of friends with Pakistanis. I have no issue. There is no issue. I don't even feel there is no discussion on any issue. There is no issue. Issue being created by some government sitting somewhere or media sitting there is nothing. So one is you have to stop reading the news, which I've done. They get that out of the picture. There is all that negativity that is given to us doesn't exist. But I think we have to get Flavia in. She's put her hands up for quite some time. Yeah, Flavia. We'll have, don't make us read your lips. We have to hear you.
No, that's all right. Am I?
Yeah.
Yes, I'll take this up. Okay. No, I just want to address two issues. Conflict management. Another term for conflict management before the conflict actually happens is peace building, which is very hardcore, a very, very hardcore look at a conflict map, hardcore conflict analysis, and actually looking down to the root cause of what has actually been creating the tensions, despite what the actors may say the tensions are, maybe something completely different. And only then can you say, instead of managing conflict, you have to start strategizing a way to actually build roots out of open conflict, even if it gets to a point of negative peace. So there is a cessation of open violence. And then how do we build from that into something sustainable to stop that possibility of open violence coming back? In the terms of, when you're talking about in terms of the India-Pakistan conflict, and unfortunately the Middle East conflicts, you're dealing with extremely long-term trauma, and you cannot manage conflict, you cannot build peace without addressing that issue. I think that's a very finally in the Maslow's list of basic needs, well-being and dignity have actually finally come into play as one of those basic needs, and we can't underestimate that. If you look at the tribal warfare that's been happening in the Rwanda Burundi area, a lot of it has to do with well-being and what we call dignity, and there are a lot of NGOs still trying to find the appropriate indicators to somehow put dignity on the map, or well, in NGO terms, well-being. How do we put those indicators actually up in program management? There was another issue, and I got so carried away with the peace building. Yes. Australia, when you want to talk about how corrupt Middle Eastern countries are, we're facing a very, very dangerous situation in Australia with the level of political corruption. In terms of, we have now, especially here in Canberra, we have the weapons lobbyists are very extremely strong here. So we have literally $500 million, and that's billion with a B, assigned to renovations for our war memorial. And you may think, well, that could fund a whole government department, which it could. The main funders for the war memorial, the renovations to the war memorial, are Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. So we cannot underestimate the level of political corruption that really want to sort of take Australia away from any sense of being a peaceful nation to actually the political aspiration now for the Liberal Party is that Australia will be one of the top 10 defence exporters. So we'll become a weapons exporter, weapons manufacturer and weapons exporter. And that is wholly and solely because of political corruption, illicit lobbying to our politicians. And it's highly dangerous. We're living in a, if you looked over the last decade, the Asia Pacific region is actually has the highest levels of buying weaponry in the world. That's a fact. And we're right in the middle of that maelstrom, but instead of being a steadying influence, it seems like we're just jumping onto the bandwagon. So yes, those are the points I wanted to make in this conversation.
The only thing, Flavia, let me, of course, Abe will tell us more about the conflict and Israel, Palestine, everything. But let me tell you about the India-Pakistan thing. It is something with, when you talk about people to people, there is nothing. Governments can keep taking up things and keep extending it for their lifetime because it suits their purpose. There is, I don't know what media tells you. I have no idea what it does. I don't know what media tells me here also because I don't read it. But I'm just telling you there is nothing. So whenever someone tells you people to people, there has not been anything. It has been something which suits people, like I said, and it will go on for a long time. These things cannot, I mean, the people vested interests there, which with huge amounts of money which are to be made. So I don't think we should ever, I mean, people to people is totally different, and government to government, what is happening and these politicians and everything is totally different. So I think we have to be able to differentiate between the two.
Yeah, that's true. See, people to people, there is no issue. But then when, when the focus is shifted on a community as a whole, I mean, a nationality as a whole, see, certain, factors come into play. So obviously, they institutionalize these factors. That is when it escalates into.
No, what I was earlier also saying that one is the fact that a government, for some its own interest or governments or their own interest, they come up with something and they create differences. I am saying, why do people fall in line? If there is a certain negativity being spread around, people should not fall into line with that. And why do they do that? By itself should be the what we should be looking at and maybe researching. Because I'm telling you, everywhere that is what happens. People don't have any issue with anyone. I haven't seen that. It has been created in their mind.
Yeah, right. Fundamentally, it's the people, see, actually the mediation culture springs from the grassroots. People. It's the individual who appreciates, who says, okay, let us sit and talk instead of fighting. That is where the mediation culture comes. It is, when you talk of people, people should really, like, how it is to be taken to the people to show responsibility. You should make them a collective force. So unless and until the aspiration for peace, the aspiration to what you call sit and talk and negotiate things and settle differences is inculcated in the people, you don't expect people to what you call react which way you want them to react. People will react as a whole as such. I will tell how are people reacting. Palestinians are reacting.
No, before that, Flavia was saying something. You cut her off. Flavia, you were saying something. Gunas didn't cut you off. You were saying something.
Okay.
No. I was in India in 2002, based in Delhi, and I met a few Kashmiri journalists there, and it was extremely emotional for them. Both Indian Kashmiri, Pakistani Kashmiri. How do I put it? A lot of emotional grievances, and not necessarily, from the time of partition and when the United Nations was set up, then, where does Kashmir fit in? But also just the accumulation of violence. And it always leaves its victims. They were still holding emotional grievances very, very closely.
That part of it, you'll find people who, like what Abe was saying. Basically, you will find people who have gone through it, who will keep that hate with them. People have lost everything. His father lost everything. I know people here, when they had to move from Pakistan into India, they lost everything. And that, some people cannot start from scratch. It is that's you're much older now, and to start from scratch becomes difficult. So what they go through, what kind of emotions they have, people would have that. But what Ilan was saying, people without going through that also have those emotions. So where do those emotions come from? What creates those emotions? That I think we need to study more than the facts of it, because facts are there, but they play a different role with different people. So I think it's more about the people and why certain things have an influence in them without influencing any of those. But you still create a hate. But after going through everything, Abe doesn't have that hate. He's gone through the worst.
That is one of the miracles of Abes.
Can you imagine that? What he's seen, how many people end up seeing that? This is he's gone through it on a daily basis. He's not carrying that hate with him. He's still trying to bridge the gap. He's doing that. So it's a way we have to find out what makes Abe and take that to the people. I think that is the most important part of it. These conflicts will happen everywhere. People will create conflicts. So that is their job. They just do it. They enjoy it, or they have benefits of it. We don't know how their mind functions, but we know how Abe can tell us how his mind functions, and this is what we really need.
Yeah. And I think it is for me realizing that you can live in a conflict for the whole life and nothing will change, except more misery, more trauma, more damage to everybody. And I think you need to rise above the ashes at one point. And I think you need to see a different world. And if you create your own world, I want to create it much different than the one I lived in.
Okay, one person, Abe, who hasn't come in, Lisa came in a little late, but she has lots to say. She always has lots to say. Yes, Lisa.
Oh, no. Now I'm going to have a reputation for having lots to say. No, so a few things. I know we have in Dayton, Ohio, the Dayton Peace Museum. It's one of the only ones in the world, right? Trying to study peace. And one of the things that we had someone discuss that we never think about, because all of these conflicts are so bad, they're so intense, and when they're taking place, they seem worse than before. But in general, we find that there are less conflicts in the world and that the world is slowly gravitating to fewer conflicts. So the important thing is to look at what is right, what is helping that happen. And the other thing, I think what you were saying, Vikram, also is looking at how do we build each other, because what tears us down when we build ties, because even, in the conflict between India and Pakistan, people were living side by side, and then they started killing each other. I mean, people who were getting along, they could turn. So how can we give strength to those ties so that they can't be broken down? How do we give strength to people's feeling about one another so that some other entity, whether it's a business, because corporations are getting into the fray, for them, they get benefit, as you were saying, Flavia, right? We have arms businesses, it's their benefit to create the conflict because you sell more arms. I'm not saying they're doing it, but I'm saying that that thing happens in the world. But how can we build the ties so that can't happen? How do we build each other? That's where actually, when we talk about a culture of mediation, that's where our role comes. To find that to find that kind of culture where we're building that so that we seek resolution before we turn and look against each other. Because once it's broken, it's difficult to repair. And if we can think about peace is not easy. Living without conflict is not easy, because just as Gunasilan, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce your name.
It's perfect. It's perfect.
Just as he was saying, that there's conflict in the world. We know that's natural. So the conflict, that the culture we're building is to seek resolution of those conflicts, rather than to devolve into the worst. So, my friend Kato is here. So, we don't want to be lobsters. We have to.
No, you can't have these private jokes happening. People don't know about this lobster thing. You can't just start off from somewhere. This is not happening. The one joke, now you'll have to explain to everyone what that lobster thing is.
Lobsters have a natural progression and it's in nature that they progress from stage 1 to stage 4 conflict, where they're killing each other, but they generally resolve it. So it's a joke that we had that discussion in one thing. But Abe, it's wonderful to meet you and to listen to you. And I would ask, how can we also support you?
I think if it's not supporting me, and thank you for asking. I think we need really to spread the word around us and infect the people with what we think about peace, about dialogue, about reaching out, about connecting with each other. And I think if the circle gets bigger every day, that's how we defeat militarism and extremism. And we just need to infect people with our thoughts, with our ideas, with our philosophy, principles, values of peace.
Conversations. Main thing is just have conversations, and you realize when you have those conversations that no one at all has any issue with each other. It is finally it's something given to them by someone else who themselves have an interest in it. But Rosalia, I was wanting to say something. Yes, Rosalia.
I just wanted to expand, just add to what Lisa just mentioned of, how do we build on resolving these issues? And also, Abe, you also touched upon it. I think what we need to do is go down to the local level. Basically, we have to engage at the local community, because we have peacekeepers in communities, leaders, mothers, wives, also religious leaders, I think that's where the work has to be done. It literally has to go down to the grassroots and build up, because everybody's been saying, what I'm hearing from everyone is, people don't have issues with each other. Most people are usually, they can have a conversation, and in order to avoid those divisions, they need more dialogue among them. They have to understand the different cultures, and and see that there's more similarities than differences. That's my opinion.
Perfect. So true.
Vikram, in this context, interestingly, you should note one thing. See, Babri Masjid dispute that has been going on in India for such a long time. Ultimately, when the Supreme Court pronounced its judgment, there's so much of safeguards and so much security in the Ram Janmabhoomi and other places. People are expecting a massive violence to spring up and all that. But then, you see, the reaction was totally different. People have resigned to the fact that this is a sort of making of a few vested interests. And why should we all join together and escalate the culture of violence? Nothing erupted. It went on so smoothly and peacefully. So when people realize there's no point in entering into these controversies and keep agitating these matters, as Rosalia rightly pointed out, from the grassroots level it should come up. And I guess religious leaders should take up the cue. The local people, community leaders should take up the cue. We as intelligentsia, like people with so much of background and other things, we should take up that as an issue and cultivate that. Recently, I was in a conference in Dubai, and I was sharing a table with Pakistani advocates, who are very specialists in a particular field. And we didn't have any problem at all. For 3 days, we were joyful enjoying our conversation.
That's exactly what I was saying. That's exactly what I said. There is no issue. I'm telling you, this is just a created thing, and someone creates something and spreads it around, and some other media picks it up.
On the people.
That's exactly what I was saying. I mean, I've traveled everywhere and I've made such good friends. Then there's no concept of talking about it also, because there is nothing there. It's just made up. But I think that in general, I think there is a culture of peace everywhere. We just have to pick it up. But we also have to find out what that switch is, which makes a human being an animal, and he can actually bomb someone else. How does he do that? And how do we how do we get that switch? How does that switch happen? And we have to get it to that. Either there is that person who can do it, or this person can let someone do it. How does it happen? Abe, what do you think?
Look, it's not easy for anybody to give up their life just like that. And I touched on it earlier. What happened here? People, when they have nothing else, and if someone comes and says, I'll give your family $10,000 to live, that you're not going to make all your life. Sometimes they do it. And they can be actually as well. I'm not talking about just money alone. And we have heard about the Cultural Revolution in China, where the people went into brainwashing schools to make them think differently. We have the same thing. The terrorists, they're very good at it. They go through this redoctrination program where they are brainwashed into believing what they're doing is right. As you know, in mediation, we accept the reality of that person. In the terrorism, they have nothing else to live for. And I think unless we start looking at the core issue, we're going to continue working with the byproduct.
No, I think, but Abe, I think what I'm looking at is that on one end, they can, whatever way, they can convince someone to press a switch, however they do it. They have a vested interest in that or whatever they have. But why do you not have that much of a method of doing it that we can actually put the peace aspect in the same way? Why can't we convince people in that sense? Or why are we not being able to do that in the same manner as they do it to push them into pressing a switch?
Okay, violence breeds violence, and peace breeds peace. If they live in a violent world, that's what we expect. if we treat him as inhuman, if we treat him as monsters, if we treat him as we don't expect a human response. I think we need to change the narrative.
No, I think
yeah.
What Flavia was saying about the Maslow's need hierarchy theory, you spoke about that. Look, if family needs money and they will never be able to earn it, give him that, he goes in that
That's
path.
one factor.
Yeah, that's one aspect that, okay, that part of it, to argue with it as to that we can change the world and we can give everyone basics, that part of it will discuss, that a lifetime will go, we won't be able to get there. So that aspect will always be there. I mean, that part of it to give that incentive will always be there. But I'm saying that in how we can actually push the culture of peace in the same manner that the culture of violence is promoted.
I think for us business activists or advocates, we need to start to make inroads. And this is what I'm talking about the peace monument. It's not about the structure that we are going to have. It's what it represents and reminder for people. So we reach more people out there in the community. Lisa said it, everyone else said it about the local, and Rosalie, sorry, about working locally. And start building that culture of peace. We have a culture of conflict. And sadly enough, even those peace activists, sometimes when a country goes to war, everybody rallies behind the war effort and close ranks around the leader, around the country, and support the war one way or another, or just keep silent. And this is a fact. The identity and the sense of being attacked is something that we need to deal with. We need to start to look at who we vote for, what platform. We need to ask leaders who are, I have done it many times. I went to people in my electorate, asked them, what are you doing about the war? What about you doing about sending our boys to war zones every now and then? And this is something we need to ask those sort of questions. Let politicians feel and know that there are people think differently to them. Because Flavia touched on that, the women industry has more influence because they are more vocal. If we become as vocal as them, we start, because politicians want vote. If they want my vote and their vote and everyone else's vote and matters to them, we need to let them hear different message.
No, basically both the examples that you gave, the weapons industry or the politician, they have a major vested interest. So we have to create a vested interest. But how do we do it? Abe doesn't want anything. He just wants to spread the good word. If you don't have a vested interest, you will not be able, you won't go out to do it the same level that a weapons industry goes out and does whatever they promote violence. So how do we create a vested interest in you to promote peace? How do we do that?
When we start to convince politicians that, because if you look at most politicians in any country in Europe or Australia, the minute they finish they resign or they lose their seat or they retire from politics, they take up positions in weapons industry or some other corporates that they benefited from there. And it is corruption. We have ex-defense minister who is now the head of the weapons industry in Australia.
That's very sad. That's a sad thing.
It is sad because they get benefit. It's monetary benefit and power and control and all of that. If we start to make peace more attractive and more beneficial and more profitable to them, that's when we start the switch.
Okay, but the interesting thing about in terms of discussion and conversations, I am on the 1st and 8th of May. We are talking about the role of mediators in social problem solving and global problem solving, and all of you have to be part of that. So whatever, I'll send you an invite on that. Flavia, yes. Flavia, you were saying something. You've got your. Yeah.
Yes, I was saying they have an incredible marketing company, incredible marketing reach. They have incredible strategy. The Invictus Games, sponsored by Lockheed, paid for by Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. And if people actually knew that these weapons industries are creating the invalids and the disabled who are competing in the Invictus Games, they wouldn't attend. But they get the likes of Prince Harry along and it's suddenly completely legitimized. But you'll never hear that they were the ones who are actually sponsoring the Invictus Games.
But Flavia, what about the Nobel Peace Prize? Who funds the Nobel Peace Prize? Nobel was basically sold weapons. They were selling, all that money came from weapons.
Yes, but when you look
exactly
at,
what you're saying, I'm agreeing with you.
No, but when you look at the mandate for the Nobel Peace Prize, when he realized, a bit like the Manhattan Project, when he realized what he'd created, he created a prize of anyone who can go against, the sins of his inventions.
But he's taken it to a scale where after that, to get it back, I think that the whole reverse it will become.
The genie was out of the bottle.
Yes, absolutely.
But they are the one thing that the peace industry basically, or the let's say the peace sector has been fighting against is its own chaos, because the armaments industry is so well organized. They have a strategy running for 50 years.
Yep.
They have, you look at the weapons industry, the weapons manufacturing industry in the States. The reason that they don't even need to pay the politicians. The fact that they have their components for the weapons are widely spread over the 50 states. So, they're interdependent components for the same weapons. You have one factory shut down, the rest of the factories will go under. So, those political representatives have to, keep people in jobs. It's really it's cunning the way they've set themselves up. It's a pity that the peace industry is not as well organized and,
No, first of all,
it's a lot more earnest, may I say.
That's where the problem lies. That's exactly where the problem lies. No, but I'm just thinking from that perspective that the conversations also in terms of peace happen with people in organizations, within those organizations, or with other organizations, or in seminars of those organizations. The conversations are happening there. The conversations have to happen with people outside. I'll give you an example. I'm talking about the culture of mediation. I've been trying to promote the culture of mediation. So there was this person in Mauritius. He organized a webinar on culture of mediation, and he called some project surveyors and all those. There's something called the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Most of them are from there. So I just spoke to them about mediation and how mediation should be part of everyone in whatever way they can do it. And this one individual who is a project surveyor, he is not trained as a mediator, has never done mediation. He got motivated and he went out and did a mediation and he was successful in it. So the one conversation, if it could reach a good result, I think we have to have the conversations at the right place. Maybe we're having the conversations at the wrong place. So Abe talked, whatever he has to say goes out to people who actually are the ones who are affected. I think that's where the impact has to happen, not with the people whom you want to change, because they'll never change. Because obviously there are vested interests there. So Abe, we want your message to go out to people, the people, not the organization people, the politician people, not those people.
It's true. And I hope that everyone understands in this room that we will be doing the same message. We all share responsibility in being heard, and hopefully someone will affect someone to make a difference to their own life as well as others.
Okay, so the other thing, Abe, from the experience here that I can go on for as long. So you are the one who has to say, okay, I've had enough. Now I want to leave. That's when this shuts down. You know this, from experience. So I don't even have to tell you this.
Okay.
And you're my guest in my living room. I can't send you.
I'll see what you mean. No, thank you, everyone. Really enjoyed this discussion, and thank you all for listening and being here. And I'm really heartened by your responses and knowing that we all share the same view of the world. We want a peaceful world for us.
Before you go, now there is Loretta from Nigeria. She says it's a bit noisy there. She doesn't want to put her audio on, but she's saying, I would like to know the skills I can use to sensitize the community of illiterates on the use of mediation. They respect litigation more. Because you can understand Nigeria's situation, how it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have biggest problem there as well with the terrorism as well, and the oil industry there that makes it all more in conflict, unfortunately. I think, look, mediation can be taught to anybody. They don't need to have education or anything. All what they need to have is be open-minded. We need to be open-minded about what we do and how we do it, non-judgmental, not to take sides, and be neutral and be able to really communicate with the people. And I think once we have that, it's just you have the material to start with in teaching the skills of a mediator. I think we all mediators one way or another. It's just a matter of just twigging it here and there, and we become. I didn't have any knowledge of mediation when I started, and I'm sure some of you in the same boat. And here we are, making a big difference to the people we would touch or work with.
No, because Loretta, I know she has very good intentions in terms of wanting to build this whole mediation thing in Nigeria. So I think the fact that how does she start, how does she go out to the community, how does she do that? With your experience, if you want to tell us something about that.
I'm happy to discuss with you, with Loretta. Is that right? Because I'm working now with Cambodia. I've just been appointed in the board of the Cambodian Center for Mediation. And today I was in the running training for them. And it's a matter of really having dedicated a group of people who are interested in doing mediation, getting themselves organized and offering mediation to people they select as a group to start with, and setting up an organization. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't need money or anything. All what they need is just commitment to do the work.
I think this is a whole area by itself. What we'll do is I'll have a special session on developing a culture of mediation. We'll do that, and then we'll get you into that, and then we'll have a discussion on that, because we've already kept you for quite some time. So thank you very much for taking out so much time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone. Yeah, I appreciate it.
And everyone, you can unmute yourself and thank Abe to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abe. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Lisa didn't get much to say. Lisa definitely.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? I didn't have to say much.
Which is unusual. It's very.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right. Thank you, Abe.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye. Bye, Mr. Krishnan.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Vikram.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.
Thank you.
So what I should do is now I can stop the recording. I can go off YouTube. Yes. All right. Thank you, David, for coming in.